Throughout the judge reading that indictment, she would look down at her computer, look down at the desk, finally cry in front of the jury. And throughout jury selection today, she would very rarely meet the jurors' gaze eye to eye. Why, Joelle and Demetrius? That would be the first thing I would, if I were a defense attorney, that I would tell my client. I told victims' families that, murder victims, all type of victims. I would tell them and their families, you look at the jury, you look in their face, look in their eye. Tell me if you've got a connection to any of these jurors, if you get a vibe with them, if you get a good or bad vibe about them. That's who I want on this jury. I don't care who they are, what they do for a living, even if they don't work. I don't care if they're white, if they're black. It doesn't matter. What matters is if you get that connection with a juror and you sense, you feel that they are with you, then they need to be in that jury box. So why? Why is she not looking at them?
Well, it's hard to say. I mean, certainly that could have been the recommendation by the defense attorney, but, they also could have told her, when you look at them, you don't stare at them. You can only look at them for a period of time. But I really think beyond that, the psychological component of where she is, what's happening to her, hit this day in this courtroom, which is obviously 100 miles away from the courtroom she's been in up to this point. So I think that everything aside, everything the defense attorneys may have told her, I think it just hit her that, oh my God, I'm in this situation and I'm in a lot of trouble.
Hello, 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 everybody. Welcome back to Facts and Sass, where we do deep dives into everything from true crime to showcasing the current culture of today's society, the ones that grip us and won't let go. This is part 2 of the dark deep dive into Casey Anthony. Today we'll be diving into the trial about the missing 2-year-old Kaylee Anthony, whose remains were eventually found, and her mother, Casey Anthony, was charged with her murder. The trial took place in Orlando, Florida in May of 2011 and spanned about 10 months. We have chosen some of the highlights that we believe influenced the jury one way or the other. So I'm Biddy, your fast-talking New Yorker. You can find me on X at Elizabetty213A. And here is my beautiful co-host, Valley. Tell the folks where they can find you, girl.
Hey, absolutely. So I'm Valley, your basic bitch from California. I know you can't really tell from the accent, but I did grow up on the West Coast. You can find me at X at the Cali Melody. I go by that Valley Girl again. And remember, for a basic, detailed timeline that led up to this historical trial, check out episode 1. The best place to check it out is on Rumble at Roman Nation, all one word. But in a nutshell, this case has it all. It kind of has like a weird family dynamic, untold secrets, forensic debates, and a verdict that sparks a lot of controversy, even to this day. So let's walk through it all, from the opening statements to sentencing and everything in between.
Yes. So yeah, let's set the scene, shall we? An Orlando courtroom, right? Packed to the brim. Tensions thick enough to cut with a knife. The whole world is watching as Assistant State Attorney Linda Drain Burdick steps up to lay out why Casey Anthony, a 25-year-old single mom, is guilty of murdering her 2-year-old daughter, Kaylee. She has to pretty much lay it out for them, because who would ever think that somebody would do something like that?
Right.
Let's summarize what happened. So, Valley, just kick us off there. What's going on with those opening statements?
Yeah. So the trial kicked off with opening statements that set the tone. Jose Baez for the defense and Linda Drain Burdick for the prosecution. So they gave the jury like two starkly different stories.
Oh, yeah.
You will hear that Linda's very like matter of fact, just kind of going through the timeline, and Jose Baez is a bit more, let's just say, like accusatory. So we'll check it out. Like the prosecutor, Linda Burdick, she steps up. She is calm, cool, but with this quiet fury simmering. She's here to nail Casey. Like that's her entire goal, right? No doubt about it. So let's break down her opening statement piece by piece. First, we have to talk about the motive, right? So Casey's a party girl, little Kaylee, a total buzzkill. Burdick says that Kaylee's death was Casey's ticket to the good life. She already went clubbing, she already went shopping. There was no toddler holding her back. And Burdick is trying to get into the juror's mind that Casey wanted this to be a permanent change. What do you think about that? What do you think about Burdick's approach so far, and just based upon the information we know from the last episode?
Yeah, so I mean, when you go through the timeline, when you just hear that, because that's what we did in episode 1, right? We went through the timeline, which consisted of like every single detail, and it consisted of basically everybody's accounting of what happened, everybody that surrounded Casey, right? Plus the police, plus the prosecution and the attorneys and what they were building. So we had that. And I mean, I think she had a good approach to it. Like her whole thing is she's trying to, like you said, she's trying to display to the jury, who are, a list of all different kinds of people from all different backgrounds, to get them to believe that a young girl that looks so innocent when you look at her is this cold-blooded killer that can unalive her own daughter. Like that's something that you'd have to really get people to believe in order for all of her, like the way that she goes about it. Like you'll see, I don't want to spoil anything, but you'll see kind of like how she breaks it down, and basically like what you said, just kind of saying, she wanted an out from that responsibility of being a mother.
Right, absolutely. So the timeline's next. We have June 16th, 2008. Kaylee's last seen alive with Casey. And then, boom, that's like the last sighting. She's never to be seen again. And we actually have a clip from Linda Burdick with the prosecution that goes over the events of June 16th, if you're able to bring that up.
Absolutely.
Day 1, Monday, June 16th, 2008. Cell phone records for Casey Anthony show that she did not leave the area of her parents' house until after 4 p.m. that day, despite the fact that her father saw her leave the residence at 12:50. When she leaves, she tells her father, George, that she's going to spend the night with Kaylee, with a babysitter. She told her mother that she was going to spend the night with a babysitter by the name of Zanny. You will learn during the testimony and evidence in this case There is no Zanny. Like Casey Anthony's job, Casey Anthony's babysitter was a figment of her imagination. There is no Zanny. So when Casey Anthony appears on a surveillance video at the Blockbuster with her boyfriend, Tony Lazzaro, on the night of June 16th of 2008 at 7:54 p.m., where is Kaylee Anthony?
So the timeline is next. We have June 16th, 2008. Kaylee's last seen alive with Casey, then gone. Like, this is the last known sighting of her, and she is never to be seen again. And we actually have some clips from Verdict going over the events of June 16th, if you're able to bring that up, Biddy.
Day 1, Monday, June 16th, 2008. Cell phone records for Casey Anthony show that she did not leave the area of her parents' house until after 4 p.m. that day, despite the fact that her father saw her leave the residence at 12:50. When she leaves, she tells her father, George, that she's going to spend the night with Kaylee, with a babysitter. She told her mother that she was going to spend the night with a babysitter by the name of Zanny. You will learn during the testimony and evidence in this case, there is no Zanny. Like Casey Anthony's job, Casey Anthony's babysitter was a figment of her imagination. There is no Zanny. So when Casey Anthony appears on a surveillance video at the Blockbuster with her boyfriend, Tony Lazzaro, on the night of June 16th of 2008 at 7:54 p.m., where is Kaylee Anthony?
Yeah. It's crazy, right? Because even if you can't just go off of George's claim that she left the house at 12:50, and he still had to go to work. I'm sure they had to look into and make sure that he clocked in for work at 3 p.m. as he's supposed to, right? So, and he lives like 10 minutes or so away from his job. So you would say at the very latest, he would leave at like 2:45, somewhere that, like, you know, at the very latest, that's when you're like rushing. So Casey's phone records show that she was in the area until 4 p.m. So Keisha,
Right, like
I just want like
her phone
right.
was there. And not only that, but I think it's so interesting that Linda Burdick says the Blockbuster. I always called it Blockbuster growing up, not like the Blockbuster, like
right,
the
like the
Blockbuster.
Facebook, like
right.
boomers will say it like that.
Right. But yeah, I mean, it's interesting, right? Because we'll see later on, the defense tries to argue the timeline of when both George and Casey Anthony were in the house, but it is quite difficult to argue against a pinging reception. So, I mean, you know, for 31 days, right, Casey is just like living it up while Grandma Cindy is like losing it. Fast forward to July 15th, Cindy finally gets a hold of Casey, finds out that Kaylee's missing, and calls 911, saying something to the effect of like, my granddaughter has been missing for a month. And Casey like finally admits it to her, right? And says like something's wrong. She found her daughter's car today. It smells like there's a damn dead body in the car. That's not something that you just say very nonchalantly, right? So like with that, the case is ignited. Again, if something smells like trash, yeah, you'll say something smells foul, something smells fire, something smells gross, something stinks. But to say specifically, it smells like there's a damn dead body in the car. And keep in mind, Cindy Anthony has a nursing background. Unfortunately, she has seen end of life care. She is quite aware of this phrasing.
Right.
But I mean, let's talk about more of all of these lies that Casey's just been telling to directly the Anthony family, but to, everyone else as well.
Oh yeah. Oh, the lies. Yeah,
The lies.
Casey's oh, the lies. Yeah, Casey's a pro. I'm sorry, but she is. She
Yeah.
spins a wild tale about a nanny, Zenaida Fernandez Gonzalez. The three
Da-da-da-da-da-da.
name, yeah, like perfect name. She put it all together. Snatch
Right.
and Kaylee. So total BS. No nanny exists. They've searched high and low. Nobody by that name exists. They can't find her with her, the description that she gave. She even drags cops to an empty apartment and fakes a Universal Studios job she hasn't had in years. She makes up a
over 2
relationship.
years, right?
Right. It was like 2006 where she stopped.
Yeah.
She makes up a relationship with someone she hadn't seen in 7 or 8 years. And Burdick's like, this ain't just fibs. This isn't just little white lies. It's a cover up. That's her claim. So now the evidence. Casey's car's a crime scene, obviously. Chloroform traces, decomposition stench. Kaylee's hair was found showing decay. December 11, 2008, Kaylee's remains pop up near the Anthony house on Suburban Drive. Duct tape allegedly found wrapped on the mandible lower, which is like the lower jawbone of the skull, and ruled a homicide by the chief medical examiner hired by the state, Dr. G. We also have the computer searches in regards to the chloroform that we're going to show you, so you can fully understand how the prosecution will show that it had to be Casey who made those searches. So why don't we listen to that now?
Friday, March 21st, 2008, between 2:16 and 2:28 p.m., a Wikipedia search was done for the word shovel. Also on that date, there were searches using websites blogspot.com, scispot.com, druglibrary.org, instructables.com for these words, quote, making weapons out of household products, quote, chloroform habit, quote, chloroform, quote, how to make chloroform, and quote, chloro 2. You will learn that Cindy Anthony was working on those days and at those times. You will learn on March 21st, George Anthony was working on those days and at those times. And you will learn from the forensic computer examiners that the context, searches surrounding before and after these searches were done on that on that desktop computer at the Anthony home, reveal that there could have been no other user making those searches than Casey Anthony.
And then she shakes her head. And she could be shaking her head because she's like, I can't believe that this lady is saying all these lies about me. Or she could be shaking her head because she knows that what she's saying is true and she's playing it up for the jury.
Right.
So Burdick's theory. Casey drugged her, taped her up, stashed her in the trunk of a car, and eventually dumped her remains in a nearby wooded area. Yeah, and this again, these are claims. When you do an opening statement, these are claims that you say, but you have to prove it with expert testimony, with witness statements. You could say anything you want, but you got to prove that, and you got to get the jury to believe it. So let's talk about the witnesses. The witnesses are stacked, right? We got George Anthony, Casey's dad. We got, and he's going to talk about like the car smell and the family mess and all of that. We got Tony Lazzaro, her ex, on her chill vibe hours after Kaylee vanished. We got Cindy Anthony and her 911 call, pure panic gold. Okay. We got Amy Huizenga, her friend, on Casey's partying like nothing's wrong, and forensic heavyweights like Dr. Arpad Voss breaking down the science. So that's who we have. I mean, there are way more witnesses, obviously, but we just, like we said earlier, we just grabbed a few that we felt kind of made or broke the case. The big pitch, no one else benefited from Kaylee's death. Casey had the chloroform, the duct tape, the chance she was last seen with Kaylee, the motive, freedom. Right? She obviously like was a party girl. She loved going out all the time. She even claimed to have been leaving Kaylee with someone, So she obviously like just really loved doing that more than anything. And Burdick's steady. She's relentless. She's trying to build this brick wall around her. And she wraps it up, daring the jury, "You'll have no problem seeing Casey Anthony killed her daughter." And she wants you to say guilty, first-degree murder. So that would be case closed, right? Or is it? So stick around, folks, because the defense is up next and it's a whole different story. So why don't you tell us about that, Valley?
Yeah, definitely. So, just going into Jose Baez, his tone, he opens up with charm. He thanks the jury. He promises that a quick trial and reframing the case as how Kaylee died is by not judging Casey's behavior. One of his bombshell claims is that Kaylee drowned in the family pool on July 16th, 2008, an accident, not murder. Backed by Florida's high child drowning stats. Often in the state of Florida, I guess a lot of those pools that are customized in backyards often have higher ladders to get up to them. They're often let up and not taken down after use. There's a huge controversy in regards to this. And we actually have a clip by Jose Baez where, in fact, he is pointing the finger specifically at George in her role.
On June 16th, 2008, Casey was home with Kaylee, and so was her father. Early morning hours, the exact time is not known. It could have been early afternoon, early morning. Actually, it was the early morning hours. George Anthony approached Casey and started yelling at her. "Where's Kaylee? Where's Kaylee?" They began to search the house. They couldn't find her. They searched in the bedroom. They searched under the beds, in the closets, in the garage. Then they went outside. This is a mock-up of the Anthony home, where you'll see they both came outside. Casey came around to the left of the house. George went that way towards the pool. They have an above-ground pool with a ladder. And we'll talk about the pool and the ladder in just a moment. But what happened next is, as soon as Casey came around this corner and went back, she saw George Anthony holding Kaylee in his arms. She immediately grabbed Kaylee and began to cry and cry and cry. And shortly thereafter, George began to yell at her. "Look what you've done! Your mother will never forgive you, and you will go to jail for child neglect for the rest of your freaking life."
I'm just going to pause it there for just a second, just because I just want to highlight, like, you can totally see the difference between Burdick and Baez in their approach in their opening statements.
Oh, yeah.
Baez is way more animated, and he's speaking as if he was there. He's really selling it.
Yeah, I mean, not only that, but he is, almost trying to reenact or make the jury think that he's reenacting as close to what happened. And like you said, and scaring Casey. And then it'll zoom in on Casey and she's like breaking down and she's crying from all the trauma, from how George constantly talks to her, blames her for this, and telling her to essentially hide what had just happened. Like, look at what you've done. Another mistake in the existence of, Casey Anthony's life.
Right.
And this will further unravel from a psychological point of view from one of the witnesses.
Yeah.
How exactly, whether it's true, partly true, completely fabricated, how childhood trauma affects your coping mechanisms and affects the way in which you process grief and an event that happens right in front of you, and how long that can take, and how erratic you can be, and that's all what Jose Baez is building up to.
All right, let's get back into it.
She cried and asked for her father's help. And it was shortly thereafter that George did help. It's at this moment that Casey should have been stronger. Casey should have called 911. Casey should have done the right thing. And that's what she's guilty of. She's not guilty of murder. This is not a murder case. This is not a manslaughter case. This is a sad, tragic accident that snowballed out of control. Her death was covered up. Why did George do this?
Why
did
did George do this?
Again,
He's slick.
if the investigation had gone in a different direction, maybe we'd have the answers to those questions. But unfortunately, we don't. We've done our best, and we'll do our best to bring all the information to you. But that, unfortunately, will go unanswered.
Look at George's face.
Here's some things you must know about the swimming pool.
It's like, are you kidding me, man?
Cindy Anthony will testify that on June 15th, as Ms. Drain-Burdick mentioned, Cindy Anthony and Kaylee went swimming. That was Father's Day. They went swimming until the early evening hours, late afternoon hours. They have a ladder that is on the pool, which they will both tell you they were religious about making sure the ladder was down so Kaylee wouldn't get up. But unfortunately, did Cindy leave the ladder up? Did Cindy forget? Because right about the time they were getting out of the pool, Casey came home. We don't know. We don't know. Is she holding guilt inside of her for leaving that ladder up? We don't know. Again, if the investigation had gone in another direction, we might know.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah. So, I mean, again, this is what like I was alluding to with, you know, Casey just feeling so rattled. And is this guilt? Is this that she feels traumatized? Are these, you know, I hate to be insensitive and say like, are these crocodile tears? But very often you are advised by your attorney to act a specific way. You know, when Nancy Grace in our cold open said, why isn't she making more contact with the jurors? Was she advised not to? So these could all be emotions that she was advised to show specifically during this interrogation.
And it's kind of interesting because if you look during Baez's, and because we have two clips we're going to show you, but during Baez's opening statement and whenever he claims certain things, you know, she has no problem looking up straight at the jury. But when during the prosecution one, I don't know if you guys noticed, but she doesn't look up at all. She keeps like this cold stare and she looks down.
Very deadpan.
Yeah.
Very deadpan.
So could that be because she can't look people in the eye when the truth is being told? I don't know. I think it's very hard. Like, I think it's very hard for people to wrap their brain around the idea that somebody can be that asocial type that like just can just totally disassociate from things that are going on, can grab different emotions and pull them out at any given moment, like an actor or actress would, you know?
Right.
And that's something that that's the burden of that proof is on the prosecution, to get people to understand that she could be this calculated and this good at lying and this good at crying on cue, or this good, because she can even just be crying because she's coming to the realization of what she did and just kind of harnessing that when it works. You know, I mean, a lot of things could be happening there. It's very complicated.
Yeah, absolutely. So, before we play the second clip, I just, want to summarize essentially what this clip did.
Mhm.
Baez, is accusing George Anthony, Casey's father, of knowing about the drowning and covering up, hiding Kaylee's body, possibly dumping it, all while silencing Casey. Like at this time, he's like even going as far as to saying like Casey was like an innocent bystander, and the only thing that she did wrong was not report what George did. That's like what he's saying.
Mhm.
The trauma defense is that Casey's not a killer. She's a victim of George's sexual abuse since age 8, explaining her lies and partying as like a trauma-driven coping mechanism. Again, what we talked about with the disassociation, people who often are victims of childhood trauma disassociate because
They could
they
take themselves
bottle.
out. Yeah.
Right, and they bottle all of their emotions. They create a fake world, a world in which they don't have to face the truth. And so again, this is going to be a recurring theme all throughout Bias's interrogation. So in this clip that we're about to show you, please be advised, it is a little graphic to hear. He claims that the sexual abuse of Casey was by George and happened over many years.
Some of this behavior, you'll realize that the apple doesn't fall very far from the tree. We are what we are because of who brought us into this world and how we were raised. Casey was raised to lie. This child, who at 8 years old, learned to lie immediately. She could be 13 years old, have her father's penis in her mouth, and then go to school and play with the other kids as if nothing ever happened. Nothing's wrong. That will help you understand why no one knew that her child was dead. That's the most important thing you must keep in the back of your mind, is that sex abuse does things to us. It changes you. Some people are fortunate to live with it. Others are not. And in this sad tragedy, it had to happen to Casey.
Oh my goodness. And
Yeah,
we should just like remind you guys that I think we said it in the last episode, but I just want to remind you again. The Anthonys, Cindy and George, the parents, they were ordered by Judge Perry to not show any emotion while they are sitting in the audience. They even got flack for that from like the media and people like, why aren't they showing any emotion and stuff like that? They were ordered not to because they're witnesses in this case. Otherwise they'd be kicked out of, just like sitting there. So like if you're looking at him and he's just like, got this like dead stare, most likely that's why.
right. And again, he is putting everything on George. He is saying the pathological lies
Mhm.
are from George. A child mimics what's around them.
Apple and tree. Mhm.
They copy their environment. They copy the learned behaviors. They are, if they're told at an early age, this is okay, but you can't tell anyone, and then that's just repressed for years and years and years.
Mhm.
That's going to be affecting you into adulthood. So I have a hard time with this. I think that we find out, of course, George has denied any involvement in this ludicrous theory.
Yeah.
But if even a part of it is true, it does make you wonder.
Mhm.
Not only does he dismiss the credibility of the Anthony family, but like he just discredits every single thing, like even the substantial evidence as well. He dismisses the car smell, junk science, could be trash. Like, who knows? Forensics didn't catch anything. It's not Kaylee. The duct tape, like, we don't know who placed it or when. The duct tape was specifically duct tape that the Anthony family owned. Again, there are other people who live in the Anthony household, not just Casey. The chloroform, no proof Casey made it or that she used it, that the searches were hers. You know, he tries to debunk every single thing that the prosecution like throws at them, right? So like even Roy Kronk, we introduced him in the last episode. He's like this, you know, middle-aged like meter reader who found Kaylee's remains. He is called Names by Baez. He's called like morally shady, hinting like that he moved the body for a reward. So we do actually have those 911 calls. You guys are able to get a feel for, you know, if you think he's being sincere or not. Did he do this for a reward money, which I believe was $250,000, or was he just like very adamant?
Sheriff's Office.
Yeah, hi. My name is Roy Kronk. I'm a meter reader with Orange County. Yesterday, I read the Anthony's route. We got done, and I got done, and I went down. You know where the school is down there at the bottom of Suburban?
Mm-hmm.
I called this in yesterday. I don't know if this is what y'all looked at today or not, but on the way back up, I stopped in the middle there where there's a swamp. If you're coming out, there would be a fence on the right-hand side and just open, you know, swamp area on the left-hand side. I went down, I had to take it, I went down, and there behind one of the trees was a gray vinyl like bag, like a pool cover or something like that. And it looked rather suspicious. I didn't touch anything. And then a little bit further up, you can tell where someone ran across with a mower, but the weeds are still real high in that area. There's a fallen tree that looks someone had tried to cut on it at one point. But there was a white board hanging across the tree, and there was something round and white underneath of it. And I don't know what it is, but it just didn't look like something that should be there. But if you go down there, there's a swamp on the left-hand side, and there's a fence, about a 6-foot-high fence there. On the other side of the road, there is another swamp right there, and that's where the gray bag is, a little bit down more towards the school, and then the area is all right in there. That's also where we found a dead 4-foot eastern diamondback rattlesnake, and that's why I didn't go any further into the swamp.
Okay, sir. I'm going to send this call up. I'm going to take a look for the bag. I also have another phone number that I need you to dial. If the phone number is set up for anything doing with the Kaylee investigation.
Oh, what, the tip line?
Yes, sir.
I really rather would not, being a county employee and all that. That's why I'm talking to you all.
You can still do it, regardless if you're a county employee. You can remain anonymous.
Sheriff's Office, how can I help you?
Yeah, it's Hidden Oaks Elementary School.
Okay.
She's like,
yeah, my name is Roy Clark. I'm a meter reader with Orange County. I had the Kaylee's route Monday, and there's an area in between where Suburban ends down at Hidden Oaks Elementary. There's a swamp area that I saw something that I called in a tip the other day, and they said they would dispatch an officer out to me when I got there. And I'm here.
Your name?
My name is Roy. Last name is Kronk, K-R-O-N-K. I'm in between. I'm not near any of the roads. I'm just in a swampy area that's between where the Anthony's Road start and and Hidden Oaks. There's no streets here. It's just swamp on either side of the road.
Okay, can you go back to the intersection of Suburban and Hope Spring and wait for them there? Is that the nearest intersecting street to where you are?
Jordan, if they come around the corner, they can see me sitting here.
Mr. Kronk, do you remember those calls, sir?
Yes, sir.
No. Now, after you made the call on the 11th, what did you do?
That was the second day, sir?
That was the first day. What did you do after you made the call?
Nothing.
Well, did you go home and lay out by the pool and relax, or what?
The call wasn't made until about 9:30 at night. Sir.
9 p.m.
What did you do after you made the call?
Nothing, sir.
Nothing.
I'm old. I went
Yes,
to
Went
bed.
home
I was already at home, sir.
and went to bed. That's it.
Probably watched a little television and then went to bed, sir.
No, I'm not
Okay.
partying.
And on the next day, the 12th, when you called, you just heard that again.
Yes, sir.
And after you made that call, what did you do?
Watched a little television and went to bed.
This is
Whatever.
probably the only part of the trial where I'm gonna like actually laugh because
know.
it's just the ludicrousy
Yeah.
that they are trying to pin him as anything other than just like a good Samaritan. Like he's like, I like watching TV. Like most people my age go to bed at this time.
Hmm.
Again, I'm doing nothing. I mean, you want me to say I'm sorry? Like I was just breathing in my house. Like,
Yeah.
you know,
yeah.
like he was saying nothing. I'm not doing anything worth noting. I wasn't driving. I wasn't
Yeah.
out. I wasn't, you know, meeting up with people. This was closer
Yeah.
to 10 o'clock at night. And
Yeah.
they just the defense kept trying to push for some
To get
type
him to
of,
admit something that he
Right,
maybe
right,
went back out and moved it, you know, like
right, like some type of bombshell to discredit his testimony.
absolutely. And you know what? I just want to point out one more thing before we move on, because
Yeah.
I think it's also good to point out that and he says it on the 911 calls, Roy Kronk. He says that we found a diamondback snake that was dead. And you saw from those pictures like what it looked like in that area.
Right.
If you knew snakes were in that area and you couldn't see the ground floor of that wooded area, would you go and step and put your fingers and try to look around and try to grab something? Like I know I wouldn't. Like
Right.
you know what I
And
mean? So it
Yeah.
explains why he didn't like move things around to just check and make sure what he saw. So he's like giving
Right.
as much information as he can. Yeah.
Yeah, and we did go over that briefly. And I think when you and I were just discussing it like off the cuff, right?
Yeah.
And like if a snake is venomous, like hell no, you shouldn't get closer to like 30 feet of a venomous snake.
Right.
And when he was even on the call, I believe it was like the first call that we didn't show, just you know, for the sake of time. But the dispatcher on the other end was even like, okay, I understand. Like, I understand why you didn't approach the snake.
Yeah.
Because at that time, that is protocol, right?
Yeah. And it's also good that he didn't disturb anything either. And I think he tries to point that out too. And you got to remember, folks, like leading up to this trial, there's already like swirling rumors about his possible involvement. So even if he seems a little defensive, in that moment when the attorney for the defense is questioning him, I can reason with that, because if you go into something thinking that somebody is like accusing you of something and they're actually digging at you like the way he was and asking like dumb questions, you're gonna be like, what? Like, what? You know? So anyway. All right, so let's move on to the cadaver dog. So Baez, he even questions the retired dog's reliability. So the dog was retired. It was brought out of retirement. It's kind of weird, like talking about a dog like that, but you know, they're part of the force, you know, so they retire.
Right.
And the false positives in the car, no alert to Kaylee's remains site. And what that means is the dog went on 2 occasions to the Anthony home to smell the car. The first occasion, he was alerted by his handler, like, come over here and smell this car. So, you know, they were saying that might be an issue. The second time, he didn't alert, the dog didn't alert his handler to any decomposition smell. So now Baez is saying that could be a false positive. And that is reasonable. The other thing is what they took him to that area of Suburban Drive and that like side thing that we showed in that picture where you saw the side on the sidewalk outside of the wooded area, and he didn't alert to any decomposition there either. So that kind of, you know, I mean, it's sad to say because I love dogs and they're extremely, you know, great in the force and they help a lot. But if the dog is retired, it's probably for a reason, because maybe he, you know, the sense of smell kind of got away from him a little bit at the end. So they, you know, they took him out. So Baez is basically urging it to be dismissed. All right. So what's the core argument The prosecution's case is speculation. No DNA, no witnesses, just a flimsy story, he says. Baez's promises to expose the truth of a tragic accident and family dysfunction. So he's short, he's sharp, he's and you know, he's like true to this wild ride that he's taking everybody on. He's saying Kaylee was never missing. You know, on June 16, 2008, she drowned in the family swimming pool, folks. It wasn't a murder. It was a horrible tragedy, a common tragedy, you know, when he talked about the Florida statistics in that regard. I know we are going to now get into the witnesses.
Yeah, definitely. No, I mean, like, let's dive into it. You have the direct, and then you have the cross-examination, and it's bringing out like the heavy hitters on both sides. So you have like the family, you have the friends, you have the experts. So the forensic experts, the psychological experts, the prosecution just built their case, right? And like the defense is like dissecting it and like tearing it up like one piece by one piece. So let's just kind of like continue with the madness here. George Anthony is now being questioned by the prosecution. Their line of questioning seems to be meant to paint George as the grieving grandpa. So first off, right, the prosecution calls George Anthony to the stand early in the trial, basically right after the opening statements on May 24th, 2011. So they're just like building their case at this point. Casey killed Kaylee. Like George is just incredibly heartbroken about everything. So the key questions is that they ask him about that June 16th date, the day that Kaylee was last seen. If we are able to bring up that clip right now.
Yeah.
Now, take us to the morning of the 16th of June of 2008. It was a Monday morning. Tell us how that morning began for you.
With me waking up probably about the time that my wife had just left for work or going to work. Me getting up and having my normal cup of coffee. Just starting my day off a little bit early like I generally have. And having Kaylee come out and be able to spend some time with her. And just, you know, maybe wash your face off and just say, hey, this is how you want to go with JoJo and get some cereal and things. So that was the start of our day. That was pretty much not an everyday occurrence, but it was pretty regular.
And is that how it went on this particular morning?
Oh, absolutely. It was a great morning to just have some fun together. Her and I act silly and dance around and watch a video or whatever it might be. So color.
What was her favorite video? Did she have a favorite?
Oh my gosh. Lady and the Tramp was a fantastic video for her to watch.
Good choice. Yeah.
101 Dalmatians that she called Dalmatians. There was just a lot of different things that just captivated her that she loved. I wish I could remember more right now, but those two, I know she watched quite frequently and enjoyed the most. Probably just one of those typical times that we all sort of just take for granted sometimes.
All right. So did there come a time when Kaylee and Casey left the house that day?
That is something that is forever in my mind that I can't forget that day, because that's the last day that I saw Kaylee and Casey together. And I remember Kaylee coming out from Casey's room, dressed in a nice little pink top. She had her blue jeans, little shorts on, her white sandals, pink socks, her white sunglasses, her hair pulled back, and she had a little backpack on. And I said, where are you going? And she says, going with mommy. And I said, oh, really? I said, where are you going? I'm going to see Zanny. And I said, really? Great. You know, I'm just excited. I'm just knowing that she's happy and I can see excitement in her. And within a few minutes, Casey comes out and, you know, dressed. And she says, Dad, we're going to work. I might be home late, or I'll let you guys know I might be staying over.
Staying over where?
She said, you know, probably Zanny's house, because Zanny was, I guess, lived somewhere close by, or she didn't want to come home too late. And plus Kaylee would be in bed between 8:30, probably 9 o'clock. And I said, okay, it's something that happened every once in a while. It wasn't an occurrence occurred all the time. It could be every once in a great while. She would stay with a friend or stay at Zanny's house or something like that. So
Up to this point in time, had you ever met Zanny?
no, I never met Zanny, never had any reason to, because I thought that's who stuff, and I did. I'd blow her a kiss and say, Jojo, I'll see you later. And she'd blow a kiss back and give Casey a hug. I just told her, drive safe, make sure you come home, not too late, just normal father, grandfather type things to do.
And did you see them leave in a vehicle?
They left in Casey's car, which is a Pontiac Sunfire.
That's a white Pontiac Sunfire?
Yes.
Did you ever see Kaylee again?
I've never seen Kaylee since June 16th. I haven't seen her since.
Oh,
Yeah,
God.
that like deep breath at the end. I was like, I took a deep breath with him. I did. Like, that is so wild to me. That's so wild to me. Right.
I have the chills like all over my body right now. Just thinking about the accusations that Baez laid out in those opening statements and him sitting there. And he just looks like somebody that just kind of like, pushes himself aside, doesn't create any drama, not very confronting or anything like that. I don't know. Like, and we're the outside looking in, so I could just be like totally naive in the way that I'm perceiving him, but just the way that he talks, and he's just, I don't know, just.
Yeah. I mean, again, we talk about her truth, his truth, the truth. I think that there is a weird family dynamic. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I also feel like he is not wavering in his testimony, which is a stark contrast to Casey Anthony, who couldn't get her story straight. And so, he cared about that little girl more than anything. So it either, I don't want to get too ahead of myself, but
yeah. I know.
Again, it was either a tragic accident or the other option with Casey unaliving her daughter. But those are the two only feasible things. I don't think George, again, from the outside looking in, seems to have any malicious intent. If anything, Kaylee was like the sunshine in his life.
Yeah.
Because Casey seemed to kind of be this dark cloud that was going through her wild days, right? And Kaylee still had her innocence about her. One thing that I did find interesting is that I don't know if Casey trained Kaylee to, do Simon Says, repeat after me. But there are a couple of circumstances where Kaylee says, I'm going to Zanny's.
Yeah.
So I think had that not been the case, maybe that would be one other thought that would make the Anthonys more suspicious. But it seemed like they were trying to give Casey space. And because Kaylee went along with it and was like, yeah, we're going to see her, Zanny, the babysitter.
Yeah, like Casey could have been in the room with her and said, all right, we're going to go now. Let's put your backpack on. All right, we're going to go see Zanny today. We're going to go see Zanny. It could have even just been what I mean? And then she came out and George is like, all right, where are you going? Oh, we're going to see Zanny, and she's like 2, so remember.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that was, kind of the case there. But that was just a very heartbreaking clip. He is also asked by Dr. Ashton about his recollection of the day he confronted Casey about the stolen gas cans. He claims that he was doing some yard work and needed some gas for the lawnmower, went to the shed, noticed the lock was broken, ran into Casey and Tony, where he confronted them on June 23rd. And Casey already had the gas cans like in her trunk. George went to get them himself. And like, it was like this huge thing. Like Casey like rushed past him, grabbed them, tossed them at them, and was like, here's your fucking gas cans.
Mhm.
Right. So there was
According to George.
definitely,
Yeah.
there was definitely some confrontation there.
Mhm.
And we fast forward to July 15th, where he picks up Casey's Pontiac Sunfire from the tow lot. What'd you smell? Ashton asks. George does not hesitate. Again, like I just said, his testimony is like very like unwavering. Like he is solid. He is solid. His story has not changed once.
Right.
And he is like, dude, it smelled like human decomposition to me. He's a former cop, right? And so they also ask about like Casey's lies. So like the nanny story. George admits that he was being dodged by Casey for weeks. And the whole time, like she was just feeding him tales about Kaylee just being with nanny.
Mhm.
The nanny.
Yeah.
And again, what this reveals is like the prosecution paints George as a straight shooter, just like I said. He
Mhm.
denies doing anything about Kaylee's death or covering up. No abuse, no conspiracy theories, just a dad blindsided by, this really crazy behavior that his daughter is showing.
Right.
And we use him to hammer home like Casey's deception, right? So like going in and out of the house multiple times, like without Kaylee, like just going in either by yourself or with Tony Lazzaro, right? And that car smell. So this is like big pieces of the circumstantial puzzle, but I want you guys to keep in mind it's circumstantial. Okay. So George, he is the prosecution's golden ticket so far because his voice is cracking. He's selling the jury that it was
Devastating.
It was devastating. It was an event that tore his family apart by Casey's actions. Again, we got to hold that thought because what is the defense about to do, Biddy?
Gosh. Okay, folks. So Baez.
I'm getting mad. Mad.
I know. So Baez, he's set to cross-examine George, and his goal is to relate to the jury that George is this dark puppet master, someone who destroyed Casey from a young age and who forced her to cover up the accidental death of his only grandchild. Remember that Baez's whole deal here is that Kaylee drowned accidentally, and George is this shady mastermind behind the cover-up. So just keep that in mind. One of the largest and most shocking claims made by Baez, the defense and Casey, is that George actually sexually assaulted Casey growing up. So of course that has to be fully fleshed out in court. And Baez has to try to convince the jury without any proof that this horrible claim is fact. But, when you say things and people hear it, now they have that in the back of their head as they're, as the person's being questioned. They're looking at every little moment to see if he twinges or, whatever. So another part is Baez grills George on the car smell and why he didn't jump into action if George's claims are true. That the first reaction when approaching the towed white Pontiac was a hard smell of human decomposition, which I kind of agree with that part. So let's listen to this fiery exchange between George and Baez, and it's fiery.
It is, for sure.
All testifying in your deposition that you did not believe that the car was human decomposition.
Sir, that answer, I believe, speaks for itself. I remember being asked about this at the very beginning. When I talked about walking up to that car and getting about 3 feet away from it, and the smell that emanated from that car, I could smell it 3 feet away on the passenger side. When I opened up that car door, it smelled like decomposition, human decomposition. I will clarify that. I didn't say that exactly at that deposition, at that particular point. That's because, again, sir, you have to, when you relive stuff over and over again that is traumatic in your life, you try to give the most complete answer that you can. Was it decomposition to me? Yes. Was it not my granddaughter or my daughter that I found in the trunk of the car? No, they weren't there. But there is a smell of human decomposition in that car, not the garbage that was in it. I'm stating true facts of what I saw, what I observed, and what I went through that day, and what my feelings were.
The explanation that you give during your deposition is clearly the trash, is it not? Would you like to look at it?
Sir, there's also a difference between trash and garbage.
And there's also a difference, sir, of saying it's human decomposition and not human decomposition?
I didn't say anything about not being human. I said decomposition.
Exactly.
I'm going to clarify that again. I think I've done that very well. The decomposition that I smelled in the trunk of my daughter's car on July 15th, 2008 at Johnson's Towing smelled like human decomposition.
Would you
To
like
me, sir, that's what it smelled like to me. And my knowledge of law enforcement and what I saw for 10 years of law enforcement gives me that opportunity to know what that is. I can close my eyes at the moment, sir, and I can smell that again. How dare you, sir, try to tell me that I did something differently than what I did?
And that is why you called 911 right then and there, right?
No, sir, I did not call 911.
That's why you drove that car home.
Sir,
Argumentative, ask and answer.
you are arguing with me, sir. I'm trying to be
Sustain.
calm.
Rephrase your question, Mr.
Then you went to work.
I know exactly what I did, sir, and I'm not ashamed of what I did that day. There's no reason for me.
Strike non-responsive, Judge, to the question. In January, late January of 2009, you attempted to commit suicide. Did you, sir?
Yes, sir, I did.
And you even left a suicide note.
Yes, sir, I did.
And you expressed some guilt.
Objection.
Do you recall being on 48 Hours?
Yes, sir.
And do you recall being paid $20,000 for that appearance?
You know, Mr. Baez,
Hey, and
Wow.
I have been nice to you. I have tried to answer every question to the best of my ability. And for what my wife and I might have retained from a news organization to bring awareness of my granddaughter, my daughter, and other missing children, that's what that article was exactly about. It had nothing to do with guilt or innocence or anything like that. We did that, sir, for self-preservations, to bring awareness for our children, for not only my granddaughter, because how beautiful she was, and the life that she meant to us.
I'm going to object to the narrative, Judge. Non-responsive.
Response to the question.
All of these media appearances stopped when the allegations of abuse came up, correct?
I believe that, sir, was done through you, sir.
Sir, do you recall finding out another way?
Objection. Relevance.
Please let me answer this.
Wow.
You don't recall being asked by
He said-
Mr. Ashton?
You
if
heard
had-
him? You heard George? He said, please let me answer this. Because he's like, I want to speak on this right now. Like, I don't want this question to go away.
yeah, like the thing is Baez is trying to get him. He knows George is like cool as a cucumber. He's trying to get him so riled up that he becomes a hostile witness.
He wants
that
him
is-
to be that person that he was acting out in the opening statement.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Very, very good. at
He's
point out.
trying to ruffle his feathers so that he, slips up
Mhm.
or he says something controversial
Mhm.
or he wavers from his statement, but he's not. I mean, look, obviously we have to play the rest of the clip, but to me thus far, the error is that George did not immediately call 911. If he had called 911,
it would have looked
forensic
different. Yeah.
Well, right. I mean, forensics would have gotten to the car before, spoiler alert, Cindy gets to the car.
Gets her hands on it. Yeah. And we'll just
and
leave the rest.
that,
Yeah.
that itself makes a world of difference.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in regards to the 48-hour interview and the appearances, he's saying, George, they stopped because of this trial. And then for him to have the audacity to bring up the suicide note, I think just stunned George.
Yeah.
It took him completely out of his element. It is such a sensitive subject. We are going to go into that shortly as well.
Yeah.
But there was nothing in that was an admission of guilt. So let's see how this fiery exchange ends.
Yeah. All right.
Ever molested your daughter?
You have to be specific, sir, when that might have happened, could have happened. You're not being specific, sir.
First day of trial. You were asked.
And a question, yes, sir, and I never.
Of course, that sex with a child under the age of 12 years old is life in prison, don't you, sir?
Relevance. Sustain.
You're aware of the possible
No, just
penalties
straight up calling him a
of child molesting, don't you, sir?
Objection, relevance.
Sustain.
You, of course, would never admit to molesting your child, would you, sir?
Objection, argumentative.
Overruled, you can ask the question if you can.
Why?
Sir, I never would do anything like that to my daughter.
My question is, you would never admit to it, would you, sir?
Sir,
Oh
I
my
would
God.
never do anything to harm my daughter in that way.
Only in that way.
Objection.
Okay. I'm sorry, Judge Perry, Honorable Judge Perry, but I object. I object for you allowing that question to be asked and answered. Of if you were to do something like that, you wouldn't admit to it. What kind of a question is that?
What's the point of even asking the question? Because regardless of what answer you're going to give,
it's going to make you look like you're
like,
how do you answer that?
It's going to make you look guilty. And then he said, in that way. What other ways are you alluding to?
Exactly. That whole thing just got me so fired up. Like, it gets me so upset because in my gut, and again, if God forbid, if those allegations are true, I apologize, that she went through that. But something in my gut makes me feel like that's not true. Just the way I look at him, what we know about Casey and the way that she makes up her lies. And I think that she's the type of person that she can make herself believe after a certain amount of time in different things. Like, I know people like that. I have family members like that they can believe their lies so much that they continue to tell it as a story as their life goes on.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. It's interesting, right? I mean, again, I've said it like 3 times a show already. There's like always like the third version of the truth that is the truth. We know and we have theories. You and I have talked off the cuff about having our own theories about the actual power dynamic within the Anthony household. So, based upon that, there are certain conclusions I've drawn, but I don't think it's relevant to the case, and I certainly don't think it's an excuse to party and act so irresponsibly at the bare minimum of what could have happened to Kaylee as like any type of excuse. So
so now, since Baez coldly brings up that George meant to unalive himself and wrote a note to that effect, we decided to look it up because he says that there was something like an admission of guilt, right? So we decided to look it up to see if we can find that note, and we did. We think it's important because a person's perceived last words are usually filled with confessions of things they
Right.
may have done in their life and
Right.
would want to get off their chest before, meeting their maker. So I'm just gonna present it right here so you can see it. We're not gonna read the entire thing, but I just want to point out like a couple of spots here. I think, let me see if I can get this nice and big for. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I'm blind even with my glasses on.
I am blind as a bat. Like I just like maximized my screen.
Yeah, did you?
And yeah, dude, I'm
right.
so blind as a bat. These glasses.
It's so bad. I think I need a thicker set.
So without these glasses, I can make out the title. I can make out International Business Times. I can make out.
we're doing a live eye exam. Okay. So,
I can somewhat make out Cynthia Marie, correct?
Yes, correct.
Okay, I don't see shit after that.
Oh gosh. We're like the land of we're from the land of misfit toys. All right. So so it starts out Cynthia Marie. So he's talking to his wife and he says, "You get this letter, this should be no surprise that I have decided to leave this earth because I need to be with Kaylee Marie. I cannot keep going on because it should be me that is gone from this earth, not her." And he said, I've lived many years. I'm satisfied with my decision because I have never been the man you, Lee, Casey, and especially Kaylee Marie deserved. Okay, so hold that thought on that one. Then we scroll down just a little bit. He says, "You were always the one that provided for her. What did I provide?" And then this right here. This right here is, I think, what Baez is alluding to when he says the admission of guilt. He says, "I blame myself for her being gone." So for months, as a matter of fact, for a year or so, I brought stuff up only to be told not to be negative. All right. So I think in that whole context of that line right there, he's not saying I blame myself for her death, for like that I did it. I think he's blaming himself for Kaylee's death because he believes as like maybe like his role in a household as a man, as a father, as a grandpa, he should have been like the overseer, maybe more active. Like if he was a detective, right? So he's, very easily can see details, can see shady things going on. He has these gut feelings that are ingrained into him from years of being on the force of like, this doesn't add up and this doesn't add up. And, just constantly like that natural thing of asking. And if he's constantly being told by Cindy or whomever to like, chill out, just, don't even bring it up, then he's kind of like suppressed. It's like, don't be who you naturally can be to be this father, this grandfather. You got to not be that. So I that's what I think. And Baez used this line right here. If that's the line he's referring to, which I think it is because I don't really see it anywhere else. He took it out of context and he knows he did.
Yeah. I mean, he even says a little bit further down, she was so close to home. Why was she there? Who placed her there? Why is she gone? Why? For months, you and I, especially you, always questioned why. I want this to go away for Casey. What happened? Why did she not come to us? Especially you. Why not Lee? He is, to me, it sounds like a couple things that he felt perhaps a bit emasculated by Cindy being the breadwinner. Perhaps he was a bit of an absent father. Perhaps he felt like Casey held grudges over them and was not as transparent and honest over the years of, struggling as a single mom. Why didn't she come to us? why didn't Lee come to us? If Lee and Casey had a relationship, like what is going on? Like, was Casey involved in such, nefarious things that someone took Kaylee, who, was never even introduced into evidence, into the trial.
Yeah.
He's just like, nothing I can do will bring Kaylee Marie back. But Casey threatened, Casey does not deserve to be where she is. I miss her. I miss her so much. I'm worried for her. Her personal safety is over my mind.
If you're gonna write a note before you unalive yourself, wouldn't you spill the beans?
Yeah, like it's so incredibly cryptic. And I think that what he's admitting to is what we talked about, is just not being a father that Casey felt comfortable talking to. And I think he was alluding that perhaps she was like involved in like she was involved in like a bad path. Like maybe she was involved with like some sketchy people and something happened.
And George felt guilty, like he should have done something. He should have intervened.
Right.
He should have told his daughter that's
Like,
not
he
you
should
should
have
be
drawn the
spending your
line.
time with. Yeah.
Right. That's what I'm getting from it.
Yeah, I really do. Like in my gut, that's how I really feel. I can see the kind of like, even like by her own admission, I'm not going to get ahead of myself with Cindy, but you can kind of see, not that she's a mean person or anything like that, but you can just see that she's the type to say, I'm not going to wait for anybody else to do this. I'm going to take care of it because I know I can do it better. And, everybody should just, follow along. And that's not like an evil person. It's just, some people are just that, So that's why we wanted to show you that, because we both thought that it was like really, really important to display that for you and just kind of get a sense of, where he's coming from. So, what did they reveal? Baez basically turns George into a villain, suggests he knew Kaylee was dead, disposed of her body, and controlled Casey through years of alleged abuse. So, yeah. What do you think? What's next with that?
Yeah, so I mean, it's comparing two Georges, two truths, right? Like there's going to be that constant clash there for the rest of the trial. The prosecution keeps it simple. George is a victim. Casey's a liar. Baez goes wild. Like George is the OG liar, right? This is all learned behavior passed on to Casey. It just keeps getting worse. Like the state builds trust. The defense shows chaos. Like George, his tears work for both sides, but they're just like interpreted differently. Like the prosecution says grief, the defense says guilt. Like the wild thing so far is the lack of hard proof. It's a lot of he said, she said. It's a lot of circumstantial evidence. This might be a problem. I mean, like George is caught in the prosecution's spotlight and the defense's crosshairs. So, I mean, that's pretty much what I have to say about it. Like, I think we should move on to Cindy, because like Cindy actually blunders like a lot.
It's bad.
Don't get me started. So, like, Cindy's take is Cindy says that Casey starts feeding her stories. Like, I'm at a conference in Tampa with Kaylee and Zanny the nanny when, like, they're really in Orlando. The phone call keeps coming. Casey says it's extended. Oh my God, like, we're staying at Busch Gardens now. Cindy's texting, she's calling, she's asking about Kaylee. Like, every single time, Casey is extremely vague, and just like insists like everything's fine. And Casey's like starting to like see suspicion, because she's like been buying these excuses for days at this point. So like from June 24th to the 30th, Cindy's account is that by late June, Casey's still dodging home. Cindy recalls Casey saying like Zanny like is in the hospital. Like Casey like literally went to lengths to make up a fake nanny who's now in a hospital bed.
Right.
And said, oh my God, like I have to visit Zanny. She's my BFF. She's Kaylee's nanny. So
Yeah.
I'm leaving Kaylee with Juliet and Annabelle, who don't exist. Super safe. Like, so
Yeah.
Cindy's like pushing harder. She's like, please let me talk to Kaylee. And Casey now claims they're staying with a friend named Jennifer until July 3rd. And at this point, Cindy's confused. She's overwhelmed. She's like, this has like never happened in
Yeah.
the 2 years with Kaylee. So Burdick questions Cindy about the evening of July 3rd, once again, an important date, about Cindy posting a paragraph on MySpace where she mentions Kaylee was missing and was asked to clarify this. Cindy said it was more of a figure of speech that Kaylee was missing. Like, you know, compared to George, where George does not waver in his testimony, Cindy's now coming up with different interpretations of things that she said. This throws off Burdick. Another moment where the jury's thrown off is Casey is coming off as someone who like is constantly skewing the truth or changes her story to fit her narrative. So you're saying you created a MySpace account and said, please help me find my missing daughter, Kaylee. Oh, but I didn't really mean missing. I meant missing as in like not present in my life. Like what?
Right. Right.
It's weird. It's weird.
Yeah. Super weird. All right. So, all right, let's get into Cindy. So July 15th hits like a freight train, right? Cindy and George pick up Casey's car from the tow lot. Cindy's first comment when smelling the vehicle was, Jesus, what died? She said when they got the car home, she starts to clean out the car. And, Kaylee's doll was in there in the car seat. She, smelt like the car. So they cleaned the doll. And that was in the white Pontiac, of course, Sunfire. That it smelt like the car. So she took it out. She cleaned it with Clorox and sprayed Febreze everywhere and sprayed the car. And my thing is like, why wouldn't Cindy just leave everything in the car? Why wouldn't George mention to leave everything as is, since he's a former police officer? That's why, like, we were both like, right there when Baez was questioning him about that. That's a gotcha moment. It is.
Right.
Since he even said the car smelled like death, smelled like human decomposition. And he should have said to her, leave everything as it is. Don't touch anything. Let's call the police. Let's get them here to, check this out. So Cindy basically put her fingerprints on the items. She's also masking the odor. And, Febreze works. You see the commercials, right? It traps the molecules of the odor, disperses it away from the area, and there's bubbles. That could have tampered with everything. No, like,
I think it did.
I'm not a scientist or anything like that, but yeah. It's supposed to get rid of the odor, like actually get rid of it, not just, mask it. So could this have been the odor molecules that, if left behind, Dr. Arpad Voss, who we're going to bring out later, could have used his contraption to capture those left behind molecules? So there's that. Verdict asked about Cindy's nursing background. That's something you mentioned earlier, and having the experience of being exposed to rotting or decomposing flesh to establish that Cindy would know the smell. And this right here is what helped the defense because of the inconsistencies in her testimony. And even with her background in medicine and experiencing the smell of dead bodies, she said she was like, when she was a nursing student, they took her to the morgue. She didn't consider it when she smelt the car. Like, is her fumbling because she doesn't want to implicate her daughter? Like, maybe she had some kind of like weird sense that something bad, maybe she didn't think Kaylee, but maybe she thought something bad. And, she knows more than what she said. Like, we don't know. So.
I think I think, a mother's love for their daughter probably got the best of her, I mean, if she's thinking, hey, I already lost like my granddaughter, I don't want to lose my daughter as well. And that grief came out during the trial.
Maybe.
That could have been one possible route that she decided to take. Like,
it's just so frustrating. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, oh, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like, she's probably like one of, again, like, I'm going to use the word fumble. She's probably one of the biggest fumbles in this case. But she made a deposition on July 29th, 2009. She was sworn in. She was asked questions by verdict and the counsel and gave a different response. Blunder Cindy. Okay. Gave a different response about putting the dryer sheet in the car. Cindy said that at the time she couldn't remember whether or not she put the dryer sheet there. So again, like another instance of Cindy possibly inadvertently or advertently, right? Just kind of destroying evidence by minimizing the car smells of the decomposition. Because then Cindy talks about how she removed items from Casey's work purse, and it included a yellow envelope with Amy Huizinga's resume. And like, this is where she found contact information to be able to like track down Amy and speak to her to try to locate Casey. And actually, Amy and Cindy go driving, and she actually does find Casey, and she tracks Casey to, again, Tony Lazzaro's place, confronts her, demands she comes home with her to find Kaylee. They drive around for a while and finally start to head home. So Cindy explains that she thought the only way to get Casey to stay in one place and to get her granddaughter home safely was to report to the police that Casey stole the Pontiac, and that the 911 calls that we played for you all during episode 1, eventually Casey cracked. She tells her brother Lee, I haven't seen her in 31 days. Zanny took her. So Cindy like overhears this, loses this, calls 911 for the third time, saying there's nothing wrong. I found my daughter's, or there's something wrong. I found my daughter's car. It smells like a dead body. But then like she goes back to that statement and is like giving 2 reasons why she might have used that phrasing. One, as a figure of speech, which again, the beginning of the episode, I was like, there's plenty of other ways to describe a rotten stench than something as specific as a decomposing body, right?
Yeah.
To say that's like a figure of speech, I think is a total cop-out. And then one was also to expedite the arrival of the police, because in her mind, like,
she was being resourceful.
Yeah, like, she was already calling in regards to the Pontiac, and then she calls, within the same, I think, like time frame, like same couple hours, and is talking about just getting the police there as soon as possible, right?
Yeah, they already took like 2 hours long, because I remember that from the 911.
Yeah.
Hours, yep.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, well said. I don't even need to add anything to that, because that's exactly how I feel too. Like, it's just like, Cindy, you're killing me over here.
It's like flip-flopping Cindy. And I, of course, cannot imagine what was going through their heads, but
yeah.
She fumbled. She fumbled with the dryer sheet. She fumbled with the Febreze. She fumbled with the going back and forth on multiple statements.
And this goes back to George Anthony when he says, like, I didn't do enough. I should have stepped up more. I was told to keep quiet because I'm being negative and like all this other stuff. Maybe he would, for lack of a better term, it's like that snip. Let's just say that when it happens to a man, when like a woman is being controlling in the relationship, you know what I mean? And he might have used his instincts to to be like, all right, don't touch a thing. You know what I mean? Like if he felt that confidence, maybe. I mean, I'm speculating, but I just kind of like the sense of getting. So Burdick, she now tries to establish that Cindy, frantic and worried about her missing grandchild, does everything she possibly could to find her. Burdick asked about Cindy turning the vehicle over to the sheriff's office, which she did, and also turning over the items from the car to give over to the police, as well as a laptop and the desktop computer from the Anthony home on June 17th. She also turned over some items much later on that she believed the nanny might have had some contact with, right? Burdick asked if Cindy turned over her phone to the police to obtain some messages off of the phone to look through it and see what they could find there from interactions with different people that might have mentioned information during the 31 days she was trying to find Casey and see Kaylee again. So, you know, trying to just figure out like everything that could possibly help find Kaylee. She gives samples of her own DNA and hair as well. So she willingly gave that over. She set up a tip line so that people from around the country could call Cindy directly about the whereabouts of Kaylee. That tip line was organized by Casey's brother Lee. She set up a command center to get the word out that Kaylee was missing. So she's basically Burdick is, just establishing that. Like she did everything she possibly could, and whatever was asked of her, she never denied, refused anything. She gave it up. I know we got Baez coming in and he's ready to cross-examine Cindy. So why don't you tell us about that?
Yeah, so I'll try to make this short and sweet, but Jose Baez cross-examined trying to flip her into a defense asset, which, like, I'm going to be honest with you, like, I don't think it's hard to do with her. Baez questioned Cindy about the 911 call, like all of the inconsistencies, as well as the sense that you get for the dysfunction in the family. He is like replaying the 911 call. He starts to ask, why wouldn't we hear George commenting on the revelation that Kaylee was missing? Maybe implying George already knew and wasn't surprised. Like he's like in it for blood when it comes to George. It's like insane.
And it's funny because he points the finger at the prosecution. I don't think you guys hear that, but because we cut that part out. But in the opening statement, Baez says, "Oh, they're grasping at straws."
Yeah,
and it's kind of like he's doing that as well with this whole like, well, we hear you frantic. Why, when you told George when he arrived at the house, which she's in the house and maybe like in the garage, and George is like, pulling up like some feet away. Why don't we hear George go, what? Like, or something to that effect. But that's kind of grasping for straws too, no?
Yeah, it 100% is. But let's go ahead and listen to that exchange now. And we can kind of come up with our own conclusions there.
On your 911 tape, you state that Kaylee had been missing since June 7th. Is that correct?
Yes, I wasn't looking at a calendar, and I didn't reference Father's Day at that point. I just knew that it was a month,
and that's even though if you count back 31 days from that date, it would have been June 16th.
Probably, yes.
Maybe she can't count.
Now,
you're alone.
You gave a sworn statement to law enforcement that evening. Do you recall that?
Yes.
Do you recall the date you gave for that statement?
Again, it was I wrote down the wrong Sunday. It was the Sunday before Father's Day, and then I was not intending it to be that day. I did not realize. I just got my dates wrong.
I understand, but do you recall the date that you gave on that day?
Yeah, it was the Sunday before Father's Day. So
what day do you recall that being?
The 9th? No. The 7th, yes. The 7th.
7th. If I showed you your statement, would that refresh your recollection?
Yes, please.
May I approach the witness here?
You may approach.
June 8th.
Does that refresh your recollection, ma'am?
Yes.
And what date did you put in your written statement?
June 8th, which would have been the Sunday before the 15th.
So in the 911 call, you mentioned it was the 7th. In your written statement, you write the 8th. Is that correct?
I don't know, did I say June 7th on the 911 call?
Yes, if I showed you the
Okay,
transcript.
I don't want to hear it again.
Okay.
If that's what it was, then I did. Again, that last call, I was hysterical.
You later found out it was June 15th, was it not?
Yes,
And the way you found out was from law enforcement.
correct.
And that's because they took a look at the video of Kaylee with your father.
Correct.
And they then wanted to go and speak to people at the home where your father was at. Is that not correct?
Yeah, they wanted to verify that date.
And you did not want law enforcement to go speak with them at the home or to disturb your father.
I was concerned about my father, who was very ill at the time. I didn't want sheriff's deputies or anybody showing up at a nursing home upsetting him or my mother.
I mean, that's understandable. All they have to do is call them on the phone and ask them over the phone, like, because you sign in when you go to these places, I imagine. But like all the dates and stuff, like even though it is like it makes her look like she can't remember things and she can't like recall stuff, it's still like, so what? Like, what does that even mean to Kaylee's disappearance? She obviously hadn't disappeared by then. That obviously wasn't the last time she saw her. So. And even in your claim, Baez, in the opening statement, you didn't implicate Cindy at all. She was at work. So why are you even bringing up? I don't know. I'm sorry. I'm a little biased because, but
yeah,
it drives me crazy.
It seems as if he is trying to, without playing hardball like he is with George. I think he is trying to paint her as someone who is just very unreliable, right? Perhaps has some skeletons of her own there.
Yeah.
He next tries to paint the picture about Casey's love for her daughter and says things like, did Casey ever seem like a bad mom? Of course, Cindy comes in and defends her. No, she was great with Kaylee. Was it easy for Kaylee to get out to the pool? And Cindy admits the ladder was sometimes up. Then the curveball. Did you search chloroform on your computer? Again, fumble Cindy. She shocks everyone. She says, yeah, I did. I was looking up chlorophyll for my dog.
Like she misspelt it. Like she was looking up chlorophyll for her dog and she ended up searching chlorophyll.
Yeah. Like what? Because weren't there also multiple searches?
Yeah, and also that just kind of crashes all on top of the prosecution's opening statement.
Yeah.
He said on these days at this time when this search was happening, both Cindy and George were at work. Nobody else could have been there in that home searching these things but Casey. And then Cindy comes out and goes, yeah, I did. Like, what?
Yeah, I mean,
you didn't even. You searched up something totally different if you even did that.
Yeah, for sure. Now, everything that the prosecution said basically during the opening testimony on where they brought up those specific computer searches, and Cindy's phone records pinging her at home, at the time of those searches, George and Cindy are at work, that's just all thrown out. That's totally all thrown out at this point. So, I mean, like Baez, he starts bringing up when Casey was pregnant, right? Like,
Yeah.
what was going on with that?
Oh yeah. Yeah, so he starts asking her about that. Cindy said it was on June 30th, 2005. And Baez's main criticism is that Cindy has a nursing background. Again, and this looks more than water weight. But Baez starts asking about the uncle's wedding on June 7th, where Casey looked pregnant, and Baez showed her the picture from the wedding that shows Casey looking pregnant with a basketball belly, but Cindy remains with her testimony that she didn't know Casey was pregnant. And we actually found that picture.
Weird.
And we're going to show it to you now because you guys be the judge.
Yo.
Okay. What is this right here?
Bro.
And then like her cardigan is like stretched.
It's like-
that looks like a belly.
Yeah.
It looks like a big, because the rest of her body, look at her collarbone. Like she's a very slim, petite girl.
Right. And that
Even
does
her,
often
even her
happen.
chest. Yeah. Like everything.
Yeah.
You can see it like, and it's, I mean, for crying out loud, it's poking Cindy right here in this picture.
Yeah. And like that does often happen. Like a lot of my friends that have been pregnant, like they have like a super small frame, either they're tall and slender or they're just small and petite. And like the only part where you can tell that they're visibly pregnant is like in their, their midsection.
Yeah.
And like that's just like what it looks like. It looks like it's small and then it just kind of rounds out and then goes back down. Like it doesn't look like, but again, it's a dress. It's hard to tell, but you can tell specifically in that area that
She looks
pregnant.
8 months pregnant.
Yeah, she looks pretty big. She
Yeah.
looks pretty big.
Yeah. So we just wanted to show you guys that. You be the judge. You can tell us in the comments. Maybe we're off our rocker. Maybe we're stretching. Maybe
off our rocker. Get it?
yeah. But you let us know what you think about that picture. So yeah, then Cindy starts to recount that they were worried she might have had an ovarian cyst because her belly was bloated. Okay. So that was an issue, and says they took her to the doctor to check that out and found out she was pregnant. And this is Cindy, because of course, the testimony by George that we didn't show you was basically that he wasn't there when they found out, that they kind of sat him down in the Anthony home on the couch and told him. So Baez asked about Cindy's efforts next to find Zanny, just hammering away. Ever since she was told that Zanny took Kaylee from Casey's allegations. So he's like, so what did you do once you found this out? And basically Casey was taken to jail. What did you do? So Cindy said they looked into the possibility of Zanny being in New York. And that was a claim also made by Casey. Like, you guys are looking in the Florida database. Why aren't you looking in New York or, all these other places? So Cindy and George even went as far as traveling to California, saying that they met this couple that was convinced that they saw Kaylee. So they traveled out there to see if it was true. Then there was also a private investigator that was hired by the Anthonys. Again, think about, when they say, oh, you were given money, you had donations, this and that. I mean, they're spending it on trying to find Kaylee mostly. So they were hired by the Anthonys, named Mr. Casey, who was helping Cindy look for a Zenaida Fernandez Gonzalez or a Zenaida Gonzalez or Zenaida Fernandez, like all these different, like just trying, to see if this person exists. These all unfortunately led to dead ends. Next, Baez asked if Cindy trademarked Kaylee Anthony's name and if she sold photographs of Kaylee and Casey, again, with this accusation of like money hungry, like he's doing that for everybody. Roy Kronk, with George, with Cindy. Cindy said it was her attorney, Mr. Conway, who did that to pay for his services, which was $6,000 out of like the $20,000 that she was paid. When she sold the photographs. Baez asked if she was flown to New York to get interviewed on this case, and she said not after the 48-hour interview. So they had done that, and that's something that George also said. This is to allude that since Cindy's disability money, because she was like on disability at the time, she was grief stricken and everything, wasn't enough to cover like the house expenses and things like that. That Cindy is somehow doing this for financial purposes, and thus Baez is trying to discredit the pure motives of the Anthony parents, frantically searching for their granddaughter and anybody who can be involved in her missing.
Yeah. So, like in the redirect, I guess the best way to sum it up is that Cindy was asked if she could like provide food, clothing, shelter for Kaylee, and Cindy said yes. And this is like rebuting Bias's claims that Casey went out of her way to provide for Kaylee in his efforts to paint Casey as a great mother, because like a lot of it was financially coming from Cindy and George. You have to remember, like,
probably all of it.
Yeah, like Casey wasn't working for like 2 years, and although the parents had their suspicions, I think they just like weren't trying to pry. Again, it kind of seems to me like the more they pry, the more she runs away. This could have always been a pattern. So perhaps they thought it would be safer to have a relationship with her if they gave her more independence. That tends to be my theory, generally speaking. Like, verdict just clarifies with Cindy that the copyright on Kaylee's name was to prevent strangers from exploiting her name for financial gain, which, like, to me, that actually makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And think of it, like, if there was a $250,000 reward for finding Casey and the PI, the lawyers, etc., like, even with that, with all of the added expenses, this Anthony's would have to raise money to where they could pay for everything.
Right.
So, essentially you have this Cindy Anthony tale, timeless of loss, lies, and a car that changed everything. Why did you have to use Febreze to trap those odor molecules? Why? The prosecution used Cindy to bury Casey. The defense used her to save Casey with all of these consistencies. So, like, again, like, did Cindy's words seal Casey's fate, or did they set her free? Right. So, quickly, let's just go into some of the I guess like minor characters. Again, these are people that don't necessarily like make or break the trial, but it is something important to note in order to give you guys all the information in regards to the trial. So we have Anthony Lazaro. We've talked about him a few times. He is Casey's boyfriend. I don't think the world knows really if they were like official. But we're just going to play like a quick clip of him talking about like Kaylee's demeanor. Casey's demeanor on the night of June 16th, the day Kaylee was last seen by everyone, and also the day that the defense claims Kaylee accidentally drowned in the pool. And I think this is very important to note. So let's go ahead and play that.
Yep.
Can you stop it there?
The
Mr. Lazaro, do you
Blockbuster.
see what's on the screen there?
The Blockbuster.
It's time stamped well, not time stamped, but the marker on it is 20.0.
Okay.
Do you recognize yourself in that video?
Yeah, that's the Marbury jersey.
I'm sorry?
That's my Stephon Marbury jersey, yeah.
So you recognize yourself.
Yes, sir.
You have your arms around somebody. Who do you have your arms around?
Casey.
Casey Anthony.
Yes, sir.
And this is on June 16th of
I feel like
2000.
so guilty even saying that, I swear.
When you went to Blockbuster with her that night, how would you describe her demeanor?
The way she was every day.
Which was?
Happy to see me, having a grand old time.
A grand old time.
On this date,
Wow.
at any time that you saw her that night, did she ever cry?
No.
Did she ever act scared?
Nope.
Did she ever act nervous?
No.
Did she tell you that her daughter had gone missing?
No.
Did she tell you anything about that there was something wrong with her?
No.
Or that something had happened to her?
No.
Was there any difference in this woman's attitude this night than it was for any other previous time that you had seen her?
No.
Did she stay over that night?
Yes, sir.
And from there on, did she stay with you?
Yes.
When she came over during this time period of June 16th, did she bring a suitcase?
I do not recall at that time.
Do you recall any of Kaylee's clothes being there?
No.
Any of Kaylee's toys?
No.
Stuffed animals?
Nope.
Books?
Maybe a book.
Okay. Any toiletries for Kaylee?
No.
On this night, do you recall her speaking with Kaylee on the phone?
Not that I recall.
Do you recall her speaking with her parents on the phone?
Like I said in previous statements, every time she ever would talk on the phone, she'd go outside. That's about it.
Well, this is while she was staying with you, correct?
Correct.
And we'll get to that. But on this particular night, do you recall her calling anybody
No, I do not recall.
while she was with you?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So she was having a grand old time. So
What a sentence.
doesn't matter if you believe the prosecution's opening statement allegations or the defense opening statement allegations. Either way, how could you just be that cool?
And his facial expressions, right? I mean, he is like in disbelief. He's kind of giving these awkward smiles because he's like they hooked up that night, right? So
yeah.
He's like replaying this back in his head. Like we went to like a liquor store, we went to like the Blockbuster, we
watched movies, we didn't finish the movie.
Cuddled, right?
Yeah.
Like he fell asleep in my arms. Like I thought it was like any other day. And yet that's the last day anyone had seen Kaylee Anthony.
Right.
And so,
and supposedly in Baez's claim, that morning was a super traumatic event. Kaylee drowned in the pool.
Yeah.
Casey's father found her holding her in his arms and screaming at Casey that she's gonna get in big trouble and all this stuff. And she leaves and she goes and let's go to Blockbuster.
Yeah.
So
it's definitely a take there.
Yeah, I mean we're gonna talk about the psychology in this case, so I don't want to get ahead of myself, but you guys will be the judge of whether or not it's plausible. But yeah, so why don't we get into Amy Huizenga? We're gonna introduce you to her just really briefly. We're just gonna again just touch upon her real quick, just like we did with Lazaro. They're not huge witnesses; they're just like small things. Amy Huizenga, she's not just a bystander. She's the one who helped Cindy Anthony track Casey down on July 15, 2008, sparking the 911 call that blew this case wide open. Plus, Casey stole from her, which landed Casey felony convictions before the murder trial even started. However, the judge ruled that it was not admissible in court for this trial because it was not directly connected, which sucks. I mean, I get it though. I understand because you have to follow the rule of law and how court cases are supposed to run and all this kind of stuff. But that could have further shown how deceptive, how calculated, how cold Casey really is, and how she doesn't care about anybody but herself and her own needs. So let's dig into her testimony. So prosecution starts. Amy hits the stand. Amy tells the jury she and Casey were texting in late June 2008 about a bad smell in Casey's car. Amy's thinking engine trouble. She's not automatically thinking a body when, Fast forward to June 30th, Casey crashes at Amy's place after Tony Lazzaro heads to New York, saying she's keeping Kaylee away from the drama at home, that her parents are fighting, possibly, heading towards divorce. So Amy buys it, assumes Kaylee's with the sitter, which of course we now know that the sitter never existed.
There is none.
Yeah. So where was Kaylee?
Right.
And the defense, of course, cross-examines. Why don't you tell us about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So Jose Baez asked Amy, like, you only knew Casey for 5 months, right? She nods, mostly text, not deep talks. Like, that's a generational thing, unfortunately. Did Casey ever say her mom wouldn't watch Kaylee? Amy says just once. So then, like, Baez kind of has to pivot and, like, basically is like, you guys were just, like, party friends. Like, you partied together, right? And Amy's like, yeah, like, it was 3 years ago. I remember the big stuff. I'm, like, past this part of my life. And he's poking at her memory and their bond's depth. Maybe trying to discredit her testimony by saying, like, she was a party girl and implying that they dabbled in drugs late nights, would have trouble remembering details. They really weren't as close as the prosecution is painting her to be. Like, it was more of like a, like a very surface level relationship. And I can relate to that statement, like when I was in my 20s, I had like a lot of girlfriends that I like went out with, got dinner and drinks with.
But
like,
has anybody ever gone in the bathroom? Those late night conversations where you dish it all, like stuff can still come out.
Right. Dude, I've had like my most personal conversations meeting girls in the bathroom. But like the point is, like, if you're going to go with that stance, like, and of course, again, like you mentioned, the stealing wasn't
admissible
in court. But like, obviously, you were more than surface level friends if, like,
she had access to your funds. Yeah.
Well, not only her funds, but wasn't there also a trip in which Casey borrowed Amy's car?
Yeah, Amy went to Puerto Rico and left her the car. Yeah.
Yeah, you don't just do that to a party friend. So how her testimony helped or hurt the case? It was essentially a win for the state because, like, she has those documented texts, and texts are pretty solid. So she has the text about the car smell on June 25th. It's coming from the engine on June 27th. There's a dead animal on the frame. It lines up with the prosecution's body in the trunk theory. She could be the spark that lights Cindy's 911 fuse, right? The 31 days missing, proving that Casey hid Kaylee's fate for 31 days. And she sells Casey as a liar who partied while her kid was gone and away. So Amy is like, I don't know, like the prosecution's like MVP, or so they thought.
Yeah.
But like the defense is spinning this, saying that, this is 5 months of friendship. It's not enough to judge her soul. It's not enough to judge like on anything that was implied, even on a superficial level.
Yeah.
Like, because the theft was taken out, like we both mentioned, like, this is a huge win for the defense because it says that, like, Casey is a flawed mom with some questionable answers, but not a felon in the judge's eyes. So, Amy may have helped the prosecution more, but, like, she ends up not being, like, the star MVP that the prosecution thought that they had.
Yeah.
And she's not this massive lie detector for Casey's nonsense either. the car does tie to forensic buzz, and her July 15th story with Cindy does scream cover up, but like it doesn't really like hurt the defense's case either. You know what I mean? So I know you have some info about like more of the forensic side of things, right?
Yeah. So Dr. Arpad Voss, he's a forensic scientist. He found high chloroform levels in Casey's car trunk. Cross-examination revealed conflicting expert opinions on that. So we're just going to, we have 2 clips, and that's basically going to encompass all of Dr. Arpad Voss's, his contribution to this case. So let's play the first one, and this is where he's being questioned by the prosecution.
Doctor, let's get back into the analysis. Now, in the actual analysis of the various items that you were sent, were you assisted by other members of the Oak Ridge National Laboratory who work in other disciplines?
That is correct.
And who else assisted you?
Dr. Marcus Wise, he's an analytical chemist, and Dr. Madhavi Martin, who's a physicist.
What instrument was used to analyze the odors from the items in evidence?
A gas chromatograph mass spectrometer.
Now, when states exhibit in a can containing the carpet sample, when that was arrived in your lab, what was the first analysis that was done on that item?
The first analysis was an injection of about 0.8 ml of headspace directly from the air inside the can. The can lid was just cracked. A syringe was inserted inside that little crack, and 0.8 ml was removed with the syringe, and that was then injected into the gas chromatograph, GCMS. That's the acronym for gas chromatograph.
You said something about headspace. I don't know the jury would understand. What do you mean by headspace?
The headspace is the volume of air contained within the can.
Dr. Voss, did you go over the chromatogram of the initial evaluation of the state's exhibit? We've talked about the can.
Wise looks uncomfortable.
With Dr. Wise, yes.
With Dr. Wise.
Yeah, he does.
Did those reflect the presence of any chemical compounds?
Yes.
What chemical compounds did that initial evaluation show?
Well, it showed one particularly large peak and a large number of very, very small peaks.
What was the large peak?
The large peak was identified as chloroform.
Is chloroform a compound that you have had dealings with in your research on anaerobic decomposition?
Yes, chloroform is a decompositional event product that we've identified in human decomposition. The reason we progressed is because the chloroform was shockingly high, unusually high. So the next step we decided to do was to try and concentrate the air sample to try and get a better representation of what may be coming off that the evidence.
And did you decide to use the same technique you had used in your other studies, the cryotrapping?
Yes. We removed the carpet from the metal can because we weren't sure whether or not the air in the can represented what was coming off the carpet. So we took the carpet sample out of the metal can and placed it in a plastic bag called a Tedlar bag. That Tedlar bag is a polyvinyl fluoride type of plastic. It is specifically designed or manufactured or sold as a product to contain air samples for such testing. So we took that carpet sample and placed it inside the bag and incubated it for 2 days at 35 Celsius, essentially body temperature.
What is the purpose of incubating the carpet sample?
Well, one, because the carpet sample came from the trunk of a car in Florida. But I imagine in the summertime it's quite warm. And so we anticipated that the trunk temperature would be quite warm. We didn't know exactly what it was. We estimated it being in the high 90s, close to 100. Plus the fact that as you incubate this under temperature, it speeds up the evolution of these compounds or the volatility of these compounds. We selected 2 days at 35 Celsius, essentially our procedure for doing this type of analysis. We wanted to determine absolutely what compounds were being liberated from the carpet sample specific, without any interference from what may have been in the air when the carpet material was collected or something of that nature. We extracted 10 milliliters and injected that through the cryo trap concentration procedure and did a GCMS analysis. We were able to identify 51 individual chemical components in the 10 mils extracted out of the Tedlar bag.
Was one of those chloroform?
Yes.
What is the output of a GCMS called?
A chromatogram.
Chromatogram.
I mean, large peaks, tall peaks indicate a much more concentrated amount of material in a very small peak would.
What was the largest peak that you found in this evaluation of the carpet sample?
The largest peak in a chromatogram is called the base peak. The base peak was chloroform.
All right, so we just came out of class right there. We got a whole forensic lecture, but basically just to kind of say what he said, it just, he had the can evidence with a piece, like some fibers from the carpet in the trunk, put that in there, closed it, and what it does, it kind of gives off some kind of fumes in that can. So they cracked it, they took some out, put it in the thing, in the gas chromatogram, that whole thing, the GCMS that he was talking about, and it had a ton of chloroform. That was the largest amount that was in there, and it was really, really high. So they took it out. They said, you know what, let's just refine it so that way we can make sure that it's actually that's what's going on in this can. So they put it in that bag. They incubated it. They allowed it to develop more so that way it can isolate all the different compounds and whatnot. Did it again. And it was the highest peak, and the most they found was chloroform. So that's basically like what they were saying in that whole explanation. But there was no way that I was going to rattle it off the way that Dr. Arpad did himself. So we had to play that clip. But yeah, so I think, I don't know if you want to mention, or should we just listen to Baez kind of like his rebuttal? And then we can see how that goes after that.
Yeah, I definitely am curious about his rebuttal. I know in a nutshell, he does call Voss a glorified salesman.
Yeah, he's definitely qualified.
He's definitely qualified. I think let's definitely see how Baez can spin this.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so here we go.
Results of the LIBS examination. What exactly were they?
They showed that inorganic elements associated with human decomposition were significantly elevated over what was found in the control carpet sample.
And the inorganic chemicals that were found were calcium?
Among others.
Sodium?
Can I look at the report and confirm?
Yes, you may, sir.
Yes, we looked at calcium, magnesium, sodium, carbon, iron, and that was the extent of the ability of that LIBS instrument.
Now, you do not regularly conduct LIBS examinations, do you, sir?
Personally, no.
These items that you have identified are commonly found in numerous other items in the environment.
Elements are found in everything known to man, yes.
And because this is somewhat out of your expertise, you're not a physicist, right?
Correct, I'm not a physicist.
You can't assign a certain amount of weight as to the importance of these chemical compounds, can you, sir?
I don't know if that's true. I mean, I know which inorganic elements are liberated and are elevated during decompositional events. I can make a conclusion that since all these elements, inorganic elements are elevated, should be elevated, it's just another corroboration of what my nose tells me is correct.
You're testifying that you would be able to gain some knowledge from these chemicals as they relate to the studies that you've conducted, correct?
Yes, so the inorganic studies showing which inorganic elements were elevated during human decomposition. That's correct.
And those, however, that comparison or that comparative analysis could only be done upon the types of studies that you've conducted. Buried bodies in a body bags, examples like that.
Well, the inorganic work was done on surface decomp.
And my question to you, sir, is that the comparative analysis can only be done of which some compared to something you have actually studied.
That's not true. You can compare anything you want. I mean, even if you're just simply seeing what's in one material compared to another material.
So you can compare any type of, you can compare the chemical output of a LIBS to a buried body or a surface body, and it makes no difference.
I don't think you quite understand what's happening here. In this particular test, we were looking at what inorganic elements were present in the spare tire cover carpet material. We compared what was found in the trunk of the car to what was compared in our control samples from the junkyard. That is the comparative analysis we were looking at. You cannot compare a soil sample to a piece of paint chip on a wall. That would not be a fair comparison.
And that is the only comparison that you can make. The controlled sample from a junkyard in Tennessee to the control sample of this car in this case.
Well, that is the one we did.
That's my question to you, sir, is that is the only comparison you can make, and that's the only opinion you can give.
Using LIBS, that's correct.
And that's the only type of testimony that you can give on this matter.
In terms of LIBS, that's correct.
I have no further questions, sir.
Oh boy.
So,
he oversimplified his expertise.
Right. I mean, he's essentially saying that you did one study, one loosely based study, one loosely based comparison, and he's trying to say
it's
not enough.
Yeah, it's not enough proof.
It's not enough. Right.
Yeah.
I was just going to hop down to Warner Spitz. He is a forensic pathology legend. So Dr. Warner Spitz, is going to be more credible. The prosecution says Casey suffocated Kaylee with duct tape. Again, the defense is claiming it was an accidental drowning covered up in a panic. So this Dr. Spitz is a defense witness with a resume that reads like a true crime novel. My mind was blown when I saw that he had focused on so many high profile cases such as JFK, MLK, John Benet Ramsey, which continues again to be another unsolved mystery, right? And the controversial O.J. Simpson trial. So let's just see what he brought to the table. I know that Dr. Spitz first took aim at the prosecution's star forensic witness, Dr. G. I love Dr. G. You know, if you look back at episode 1, guys, again, available on Romanation, on Rumble, we show a lot of coverage in regards to Dr. G. And he is debunking her autopsy of Kaylee's remains. You'll just have to see for yourself. We do have a clip of Dr. Warner Spitz's testimony and some of its highlights.
Yeah. All right. Enter Dr. Warner Spitz.
Let's go.
In direct examination, that the failure of Dr. Garavaglia to open the skull was a violation of protocol.
Correct.
What protocol is that?
Let me say this, that the skull, the head, is part of the body. And when you do an autopsy, you examine the whole body. It's a complete structure. The body is a complete structure. The head is an extremely important item in all this. There can be all kind of things in a head that occur that you need to know about. You mean to say that I examine only from the head down? The rest is of no significance? To not open the head, I think, is a failure of the autopsy. And I'll tell you another thing, that if an autopsy was done in a corresponding to what I think every forensic pathologist will tell you, where the head is not opened, that tells me about a shoddy autopsy. Excuse me the expression, but you provoked it. A shoddy autopsy, because if the head is not opened, what else wasn't examined?
You recall reading Dr. Garavalia's statement references to duct tape?
I understand that there were some sections of duct tape on the lower face that were loosely on the face, but since there was, I should say, there was not a shred, I've not said that before, not a shred of soft tissue, no skin, no muscle, no fat, no nerves, no blood vessels, no nothing.
From
Didn't do a good
Dr.
job.
Gavalia, she indicated that the duct tape was clearly placed prior to decomposition. What, if any, opinion do you have regarding that assertion, sir?
Well, I have some problem with that. Because when duct tape is applied to the skin and the skin decomposes, the duct tape just doesn't go anywhere. The duct tape just doesn't do anything. The duct tape becomes loose on the skeletal structure. In this case, the face. The only thing that held the duct tape there was the roots and the hair. There was nothing on the bone that would suggest duct tape. There was nothing on the duct tape that would suggest the application on the skin either. It is my strong feeling and opinion that this duct tape was perhaps placed there to hold the lower jaw in place, because if the head is subjected to as complete a decomposition as it did, where there is absolutely no trace of flesh on this head or in this head, if I would have picked this up like this, the lower jaw would have dropped.
Would you have expected there to be DNA on the duct tape if in fact it had been placed over the face?
There is no doubt in my mind that if you would have had duct tape on the skin, there would have been some evidence of the presence of that skin DNA on that duct tape. I think that the duct tape was a later event, not an early event.
After decomposition.
After decomposition.
Is it your opinion that the duct tape was applied to the skull after it was fully skeletonized?
It is my opinion that the duct tape was stuck on there after the skin had deteriorated, after the skin was decomposed.
How did
through the whole process of adipocyte, you see the skeletonization here. You see it. It's looking at you. It's looking at me.
Well,
So in a nutshell, right, we have Dr. G, again, who we highlighted in episode 1, and Spitz. Dr. G tends to try to establish the fact that this was part of the homicide of Kaylee.
Yeah, she even mentioned that the teeth were still there. Yeah.
Right. So she is presenting that the duct tape was put on before the time of death and thus contributed to the death, while Spitz is alluding that the duct tape was added after the fact.
Right. So
Yeah.
yeah, so what's the takeaway, folks? For the defense, Spitz was a heavy hitter. His critique of the autopsy and his duct tape after death theory gave them ammo to argue Kaylee's death wasn't a murder, maybe an accident, maybe something else, but not what the state claimed. It fueled their reasonable doubt strategy for that. So, and then you think about the prosecution. Though Spitz's testimony was a hurdle that they had to clear, they leaned on their own experts and the circumstantial evidence, like the duct tape's position, Casey's behavior, to keep their story intact. Now, Valley, how about we get into the psychology in this case? This is the part I think we've all been waiting for.
Yeah.
How could Casey have done this?
Yeah,
How could
absolutely.
Casey have lied so much? Yeah.
This is kind of like my bread and butter, Biddy, because I love psychology. I definitely love learning about the brain and like, just like how everything is interconnected.
Yeah.
I am just going to have a lot to say about this next witness after it's all said and done. You know me, so I talk about this stuff all the time.
Yeah.
So for now, we are going to get into the expert testimony of Dr. Sally Carrioth, a grief expert who tried to explain why Casey partied while her daughter was missing. She's all about like feelings and trauma and disassociation. And let's just dive into her testimony. Okay, so Dr. Sally Carrioth, she is a professor at Florida State University, nursing and medical theater, musical theater, degrees out of all things.
Right.
Like nursing and medical would have made sense, but nursing and musical theater. So she is a certified traumatologist. Okay, we don't hear that very often. She is a grief and trauma guru with decades of experience helping people navigate loss. So the defense, represented by attorney Dorothy Clay Sims, calls her in to tackle one big question. Like, how could Casey Anthony act so carefree after Kaylee disappeared?
Yeah.
Because it's weird. It's just bizarre. And I think it's important to point out that she is working on hypotheticals to unpack Casey's like headspace. So just think of her as like the why did she do that expert in a trial full of what happened debates. You're going to hear a lot of like hypotheticals that are like basically what happened. And just like asking like, how would she grieve? She doesn't analyze their bond directly since she never met them, didn't have the preparation to, but implies Casey's behavior fits a young mom in denial, not necessarily a killer. And this was just like a clip where she basically explains her theories on that.
Yeah.
31 days after that child is gone, the young mother leaves home, goes out, rents movies, goes shopping, goes out to a bar, gets a tattoo that, when translated, indicates beautiful life. That kind of behavior. Can you please describe for me the significance of any with regard to that type of behavior and grief reactions?
Well, there's more than in what you described. It would be important to look at the behavior of what everybody did in those 30 days. And what I often see in young adults, and in this situation, it seems very, very like other young adults, is they are reluctant grievers. Young adults are reluctant grievers, and they will often say nothing has happened. They will demonstrate risky behavior. They'll go out and do the very thing that their friend died from. They will drink too much. They may drug too much. They may Retail therapy is a big event among young women, and I don't know about this particular case, but let's say in this particular case, the thought that if I can acquire enough things, I can make this go away, and partying sometimes to the point of right on the edge of hysteria, which there's a real close bond between mad and sad, and they look very different, but they actually are both responses to a loss issue. And so when I look at young adults who have limited exposure with the world and appropriate kinds of behaviors, I see often risk-taking, repeating the things that happened to the person, looking like they're having such a great time, spending all kinds of money they don't have, getting into trouble, might be minor, but it's called bereavement overload. And when
I'm sorry, what?
Bereavement overload. And when someone has had loss after loss after loss, they'll then act out because they've decided that they don't want anyone to be near them because everyone that's near them leaves them. And so, and it doesn't, I know you all know that death isn't the only loss in the world.
Yeah. So, so she explains her theory on, what would happen to somebody in a stage of grief, what a person might do if they're just trying to go numb and not think about like the trauma that they experience. Ashton, prosecutor Jeff Ashton, he pounces back. He says, "You're making this up, right?" He hits her creds. No peer-reviewed articles on this. Carrie Oath admits she can't name journals to support this. Her work is more practical than academic. So let's just quickly take a look at their exchange, and then we can just kind of see the difference between the two.
You refer to something called denial as a reaction to the loss of a loved one, correct?
As one type of coping mechanism, yes.
Denial doesn't mean literally lying, does it? Does it?
Well, it certainly can mean lying to yourself.
Hypothesize that this 22-year-old mother, this child dies and she doesn't tell anybody that the child has died. No one. She then goes to her boyfriend's house and rents a movie, spends the night, engages in sexual relations with her boyfriend that day. Now, she then, over the next 30 days, continually tells different people different stories about where her child is. She tells her mother that the child is with an imaginary or fictional babysitter. She tells her friends that the child is with her mother. After a couple of days of her mother insisting that she wants to see the child, she then tells her mother that, in fact, she and the child are with this imaginary babysitter in Tampa, Florida. Let's say they're from Orlando. She isn't in Tampa, Florida. She's in Orlando. Everyone else she talks to knows she's in Orlando, but her mother, she tells that she's in Tampa with the child. After a few days, her mother asks when she's coming back. She creates another fiction of an automobile accident in Tampa, claiming that she has to stay in Tampa for a few more days because of this accident. She, in fact, is still in Orlando and still telling people, other than her mother, that the baby is with the babysitter somewhere else. She then, after a few days, tells the mother that she and the child are at Universal Studios at some particular type of event for children, and that they're staying over with another imaginary individual who happens to be a wealthy potential boyfriend.
Jeffrey
She's not at Universal.
Yeah.
She's not telling anyone but the mother that she's at Universal. And after a couple of days of that, she tells the mother that, oh, no, we've gone to Jacksonville. Myself, my child, and this potential suitor, we're in Jacksonville. But she's not in Jacksonville. She's in Orlando. And everyone else she talks to knows she's in Orlando. I could go on and on. You would agree with me that that type of conduct is not consistent with the type of denial that is seen in grieving mothers, wouldn't you?
I would agree that that's a young woman in crisis who is unable to figure out how to make things better.
Just want to say that this is her brushing up against the microphone, so the audio can't really fix that, unfortunately.
I may call that grief only because grief makes people do very unusual things. But as you described that hypothetical child to me, I would think that we needed to get her some help.
But you would agree that that is not consistent with what one typically sees in denial situations in grief, wouldn't you?
Now, I would call that more magical thinking. If I can keep all these balls in the air, maybe it won't be true what I'm fearful may have happened.
So, well, this is my issue, right? So Ashton's trying to get like a gotcha out of her, and he's not able to because she's still excusing it no matter what. She is saying, she talks about bereavement overload in the beginning, and then she talks about, yeah, well, this is just her trying to balance a bunch of different things so that her brain doesn't comprehend the truth. And it's really a coping mechanism. And, you know, you see this a lot with DID, dissociative identity disorder, which is multiple personalities, where you have different alters come forth to protect
the others from a
right, your main self from processing a traumatizing event.
Yeah.
And
very
Ashton,
fascinating.
right, and Ashton is trying to get her to say, like, okay, but a grieving mother doesn't do all this. And she's like, well, I didn't quite say that. You tell me, like, do you think that it helped the defense? Because to me, I feel like this really helped the defense, and this did not help the prosecution at all.
Yeah, I mean, I think it did. To me, I think the prosecution didn't play this up enough.
Right.
I think it could have been a win for the prosecution, and I'll tell you how. One, let's just say the defense, right? Because of everything that you just said and how she was kind of like dancing around it, that it like all of this could be an extension of a person being in denial. It's so crazy because like you try to like just I feel like I'm going in like a circle in my head trying to like pinpoint down everything that she said, because it's like first it's like Zanny kidnapped her, and this whole time she's trying to figure out where she is, and that's why she's lying to kind of buy time to find her. Then now the trial starts, and the whole claim is that Kaylee drowned in the pool, so she's been dead this whole time. So now we're trying to figure out how, you know, how our actions are perceived. But in my thing is the prosecution could have tried to ask Dr. Carriog, okay, so you're explaining a person how they would behave in grief and trauma. What if the person, and you know, he does kind of mention this, but couldn't that person be, couldn't that scenario or that trauma, couldn't that create somebody who can totally disassociate from what they're doing, and to the extent of actually murdering someone, or and even further murdering their own flesh and blood?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like that, that's where I think he really should have went with that, because then it turns the whole defense's argument of, you know, it just shows that she was in so much trauma and grief that she behaved the way that she did. And it's like, okay, and she was probably, abused and all this stuff when she was little, and pushed aside, and not really they didn't really attend to her as much, her parents and stuff like that. Couldn't that have created somebody who would totally be able to do something this horrific and not even realize what they're doing at the moment? Like, I just think they should have went there. Like, Ashton then asks, like, what if this mom killed her kid on purpose? So, he did mention that. Defense objects, but Ashton's points lands. People who commit awful acts can compartmentalize and move on. No grief needed. Basically what I was just saying. He's saying Casey's actions fit a murderer, not a mourner. But I think that they didn't drive that home enough. So did it help or hurt the case, right? So that's what you asked. It helped the defense. Carry out a lifeline for Baez's team. She gives a why to Casey's bizarre behavior, grief, not guilt, tying it to their accidental drowning claim. If the jury buys it, it chips at the prosecution's party girl killer narrative. Her vibe's relatable, less lab coat, more human, and that might have clicked with some jurors because, sometimes you hear all that forensic stuff and, it goes in one ear out the other. And it's a hurt for the prosecution. This is the overall idea that she's a thorn in their side. It messes with their Casey's a sociopath story, which I disagree. Ashton's chloroform and duct tape theory needs Casey to be calculating, not grieving. Carriots, anything's grief take blurs that line. And her testimony late in the trial also might have kind of stuck with the jury over the whole forensic noise. So they kind of placed her in a good spot there, the defense did.
Right. So I told you this is kind of my bread and butter. Before we move on to our last witness, I really just want to hammer in Grief Theories 101 with Valley. So what's grief, right? Grief is like this messy human response to loss, death, divorce, you name it. Experts like Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who was a Swiss-American psychiatrist and a pioneer in the study of death and dying, is best known for her groundbreaking book, even, on death and dying, written in 1969, where she introduced the Kubler-Ross model. She outlines the 5 stages of grief, which is denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. So her work revolutionized really the care of the terminally ill patients and brought attention to the hospice movement, which is crazy.
Yeah.
It's not a straight line. People bounce around, they skip steps, they invent their own, but there is complicated grief, which is essentially what Dr. Carrioff is saying, where it gets stuck or it gets weird, like acting out or crying, like being happy, like Tony Lazzaro said, instead of being sad, like processing instead of pushing it to the side. Like really that grief isn't linear and it's like a roller coaster. Some scream, some shut down, some party, I guess. That's where like Casey comes in. Like, did she ride the ride? Did she fake the ticket? Are these true emotions? Is she really displaying grief? So again, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, her denial stage, kind of fits Casey like a glove, right? Because June 16th, Kaylee drowns per the defense, and Casey can't process it. She's invented like a world of characters like Zanny. She has like over 12 people in her life. 12 fictional characters. Okay. And she tells like fairy tales. She acts like nothing's wrong. She's like partying like it's her shield, like going to the Blockbuster. Saying, like, if I keep moving, if I keep doing things, if I keep myself busy, like this doesn't happen.
Yeah.
So then you have complicated grief, which psychologists like Dr. Catherine Shear talk about complicated grief when loss gets tangled with trauma or guilt. So Casey's alleged abuse by George, per bias, could twist her grief into avoidance. The stealing, the impromptu tattoo, the clubbing as escape hatches, no morning rituals, no closure, just chaos. And then there's disenfranchised grief, which is Dr. Kenneth Coda's theory. If Kaylee drowned and Casey hid it, she can't grieve publicly because she's like afraid of like being shunned. So like no like sympathy at like a funeral, like she's just stuck. So she fakes normalcy with the people around her, like the Tony Lazzaros, like all of her friends. So, you know, the wrap up here is that Casey, like through the grief lens, the denial, the trauma, the disassociation, like, is that all part of this process? Or is it just a really good act? Let us know. Let us know in the chat if you think she's like a grieving mom or a master manipulator, or if you are just ready to move on to our last witness here, like Biddy has ready for us.
Yeah, and thank you for all of that. I mean, it's really a complicated thing. So, you know, that's why this kind of stuff, when it's in a courtroom, it really muddies the waters. So,
For sure.
but well pointed out. I don't really know what I think. I'm still processing
It's like the
all
more
of this,
we
even
hear-
after like weeks of doing this. Like,
Yeah,
I'm
no,
still
for sure.
processing. Yeah.
For sure. And it's like the more information we hear, the more we are
like
overloading
moved.
our own brains and
yeah.
are like, wait, like we were so sure. Like again, if you guys haven't seen episode 1, like we were so sure. We were so sure that Casey unalived Kaylee. The more you really dive deep into this, the more uncertain you become.
All right. So, last but not least, let's get ready for who we're going to present next. Let's meet Crystal Holloway, aka River Cruz. She's a volunteer turned alleged mistress who dropped a bombshell about George Anthony. Was she a key to unraveling Kaylee's death, or just a tabloid sideshow? We're breaking down her testimony and whether the prosecution or defense came out on top with her credibility. So Jose Baez, this is his witness. He's going to do his direct examination. So Crystal takes the stand June 30th, 2011, day 32 of the trial, right as the defense is wrapping up. It's a big moment for Jose Baez, Casey's lawyer, who's pushing the Kaylee drowned, George covered it up angle. So here is where he is going to claim that he has more proof to that effect. She tells the jury she met George in July or August 2008 at the Anthony family's search tent for Kaylee. Kind of crazy. Things got cozy fast. She says they started an intimate relationship that lasted months, with George visiting her condo a dozen times. Crystal pulls out texts from George, like one from December 16, 2008, saying, "Just thinking about you. I need you in my life." She also had proof from the gate guard in her apartment complex who can corroborate that George did visit her at home a number of times, but both these things still not prove they had a sexual relationship. She says their fling fizzled by February 2009 after Kaylee's memorial, when George ghosted her. So prosecution's gonna also cross-examine. Hit prosecutor Jeff Ashton comes in hot on cross-examine. "You sold your story to the National Enquirer." That's one thing that she did for $4,000, right? Crystal admits it. She says she picked the tabloid because they tell her story fairly, unlike other outlets. Ashton comments on this saying, "You chose the National Enquirer of all things because you thought they wouldn't twist your story." Just trying to like play that up, like the National Enquirer, like the conspiracy theory. Well, these days conspiracy theories are a little different, but then Ashton grills further, like, "So it's more sensational with an affair, huh? Like, that if that was part of like her story, that she would have more to give the media." Holloway stands her ground and says, "I did have an affair with George." Ashton does also bring up the fact that she first denied their relationship, but then claimed later that they had a full-out affair. Holloway defends this by saying she first lied because she didn't want to be embarrassed or get anyone in trouble. Then she said she was presented with the discovered text messages by police, so she knew she couldn't lie about it to them. Yada, yada, yada. So now let's just look into the holes that the prosecution aimed to poke in Holloway's story. Ashton digs into her 2010 police statement.
Now, let's get to the statements that you claim that George made. What you were talking to him about his daughter and how you couldn't believe that he could raise a daughter that would deliberately kill her child.
That's correct.
And what he said to you is, I really believe it was an accident that just went wrong.
Objection,
Isn't that
Judge.
true?
That misstates her statement.
It does not.
It does, Judge.
Well,
That's not
gentleman
what she
approached the
testified.
sidebar and bring me the statement. Objection withdrawn. You may proceed.
What he said was, I really believe that it was an accident and it just went wrong and she tried to cover it up. That's what he said.
No, he did not.
Do you recall, again, in your statement to law enforcement on that same date we have discussed where you took an oath to tell the truth, for counsel's benefit, page 16, line 25 through page 17, line 1. May I approach the witness?
You may.
The jury, what you said at page 16, line 1, and then completed on page 17.
He just said that I really believe that it was an accident and it went wrong and she tried to cover it up.
I really believe.
Is that in fact what he said?
Yes, but he also said that it
Ma'am, there's no question before you.
Witness be allowed to finish her answer.
She is not finishing the answer. She's adding additional information.
Ma'am, finish your answer.
You didn't read what was above that was highlighted. He also said it was an accident that snowballed out of control.
Now, did he also tell you, I'm sorry, he didn't tell you that he was present when this occurred, did he?
I'm sorry?
He didn't tell you that he was present when this occurred, did he?
When what occurred?
When this accident occurred.
No.
In fact, he never told you that he knew it himself, that he knew that to be the case.
I just told you that's what he said. I never elaborated to anything else. I never said that he said anything else other than what he said.
Other than he believed it was an accident that snowballed out of control and she tried to cover it up. That's all he said.
That's not what he said. He said it was an accident that snowballed out of control.
But he didn't claim that he actually was there or knew that.
You're right. I agree with you. He didn't.
He said he believed it.
No, he did not say he believed it.
Now, he didn't say that he knew it, and he never said that Casey said it.
No, sir, you're right.
Yeah, I think somebody needs to explain to her the operative word and what that means. Because the operative word here that she read in her own sworn statement deposition was, he said, I believe it was an accident and it snowballed. Like, she wanted to add the snowballed out of control part. It's like, okay, but the whole point of it is that he's saying, I believe this is what happened. He's not saying I'm confiding in you and this is what happened. Like, you know what I mean? Like, he's saying that's what I believe. Like, that's in his gut. That's what he feels happened. And I think she just got too preoccupied with like, you know, thinking of like being held for perjury.
Yeah, no, you could definitely tell that it was due to like her not wanting to be charged for perjury. I think she got like very, very emotional on the stand, and that could be a chip at her credibility, perhaps.
Yeah. So what they revealed, the prosecution frames Crystal as unreliable, a liar who cashed in on a juicy story. Ashton tears into her like you're a tabloid queen, not a truth teller. By his questions, Crystal back again to back his claim that George knew Kaylee drowned and hid it. Did George tell you Kaylee was dead while he was out there saying she's missing. He asked on redirect. She said yes. She says huge for the defense. They lean on her text too. I need you in my life. Crystal's their ace to make George look shady, crying about an accident in November 2008 fits their June 16 drowning story. Like, she's proof he's not the grieving grandpa the prosecution loves, but a guy with secrets. Baez doesn't care about her flip-flops. He's selling doubt about George. And then just to point out, Judge Perry made a statement to the jury basically saying to use Holloway's statement, it's to be used to just impeach the testimony of George Anthony and not to use it as a fact to say how Kaylee Anthony died.
Yeah, I mean, you basically nailed it. Like, the prosecution hammered her hard about the $4,000 from the Inquirer. A lot of wobbly statements, no proof George was there. The defense's edge, I don't know. It was just like Baez didn't need her perfect, right? He needed her believable enough to rattle George's story.
Yeah.
So there's Crystal Holloway, volunteer, lover, little crazy, witness, wild card, 2 names. I mean, look, her affair with George and the accident bombshell did lit up the trial, but did her credibility? Like, was it just noise? Did she sway the jury to acquit Casey? So before we give you the reveal, for some of you who are not familiar with the outcome of this case, let's hear, the closing arguments from the defense and the prosecution, guys. We are almost there.
I know. All right. So first we're going to play a clip of highlights for both the prosecution and the defense. We see Baez is very good at theatrics. We've already seen that, selling a story. You will notice the contrast with the prosecutions. Ashton seems to opt for a more speak to the heart kind of approach while recapping all the expert witness testimonies that they brought forward. So let's hear the whole thing, just a little compilation here.
Remains are found
Sounds
within a
good.
quarter mile of the Anthony home. With her remains are found a number of items, a number of very important items. The evidence in this case proves beyond any reasonable doubt that Casey Anthony decided on June 16th that something had to be sacrificed, that the conflict between the life that she wanted and the life that was thrust upon her was simply irreconcilable, and something had to give. She chose to sacrifice her child to live the life that she wanted. She took her child, she took her life, and she put her in the trunk and forgot about her. After a couple of days, she couldn't forget anymore. And she disposed of her body in a swamp. These are the facts that you have heard, and these are the facts that prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Casey Anthony is guilty of murder in the first degree, and that murder is premeditated.
They're hoping they throw enough against the wall and see what sticks. That's what they're doing here. Let's throw it all against the wall and see what sticks. Right down to their cause of death. 1 week it was chloroform. Today it's duct tape. Let's make up our minds and say we prove to you that this case was proven beyond and to the exclusion of every reasonable doubt. How can you say that? How? It makes no sense. But this is the level of absurdity, the desperation that this case, that this prosecution will take it to. They'll take it to the next level. They'll ask you to see things that aren't there. And they'll ask you to imagine fictional science. It's a fantasy of forensics, is what it is. A forensic fantasy and nothing more. We have the most advanced crime-fighting tools available to us anywhere in the world. And they couldn't find a single link from Casey to Kaylee's death. Not a single link. But yet they want to create things. For what? The cameras? Because it's a high-profile case? No, because it's about winning. win at all costs, no matter how much it costs, no matter what it costs.
As hard as it is for anyone to imagine, she had to choose between sacrificing two things. The first was her dreams and the life she wanted, and the second was her child.
Prosecutors showed this picture of Casey with Kaylee wearing the same shirt found with her decomposing remains and pointed out that Casey was the last person to be seen with Kaylee the morning of June 16th, 2008, when Casey told her parents she and Kaylee would be spending the night at the imaginary nanny's house.
So on that morning, Casey knew she would not be staying at that house, and that neither would Kaylee, because she knew that that night she would be in the arms of her boyfriend and that Kaylee would be dead.
Prosecutors contend Casey drugged Kaylee with chloroform and then used 3 pieces of duct tape to suffocate her. But Casey's attorney spent hours deriding what he called the prosecution fantasy and said they had failed to answer the central question.
The key question in this case will never be answered. It can never be proven. And that is, how did Kaylee die?
Jose Baez reiterated his theory that Kaylee drowned in the family pool and accused Casey's father, George, of disposing of her body. Baez said the state had stuffed its case with accusations against his client, but not proof that she murdered her child.
The strategy behind that is if you hate her, if you think she's a lying, no good, then you'll start to look at this evidence in a different light. You'll start to, well, wait a minute. Maybe I'm seeing something that's not there.
All right.
Yeah.
So there you have it, folks. That's their final plea, as it were. And you saw the contrast between the two, and and everything. How about we get to the verdict? Let's get to the part that everybody's waiting for. And the verdict, it hit like a thunderclap. Casey faced multiple charges and the outcome was a shock. So let's listen to the verdict and the sentencing.
Madam Clerk, you may publish the verdicts.
In the Circuit Court for the 9th Judicial Circuit in and for Orange County, Florida, State of Florida versus Casey Marie Anthony. As to case number 2008 CF 15606-0. As to the charge of first-degree murder, verdict as to count 1, we the jury find the defendant not guilty, so say we all. As to the charge of aggravated child abuse, verdict as to count 2, we the jury find the defendant not guilty, so say we all. As to the charge of aggravated manslaughter of a child, verdict as to count 3, we the jury find the defendant not guilty, so say we all. As to the charge of providing false information to a law enforcement officer, verdict as to count 4. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty of providing false information to a law enforcement officer as charged in the indictment. So say we all. As to the charge of providing false information to a law enforcement officer, verdict as to count 5. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty of providing false information to a law enforcement officer as charged in the indictment. So say we all. As to the charge of providing false information to a law enforcement officer, verdict as to count 6. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty of providing false information to a law enforcement officer as charged in the indictment. So say we all. As to the charge of providing false information to a law enforcement officer, verdict as to count 7. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty of providing false information to a law enforcement officer as charged in the indictment. So say we all.
Will counsel and the defendant approach the podium? Casey Marie Anthony, the jury of your peers, having found you not guilty as to the charge contained in count 1 of the indictment, murder in the first degree, at this time, I will adjudge you to be not guilty. As to count 2, the crime of aggravated child abuse, a jury of your peers having found you to be not guilty, the court will adjudge you to be not guilty of the crime contained in count 2.
She was there this whole trial. She doesn't even want to look at the jury, the judge,
count
nobody.
3, aggravated manslaughter of a child, a jury of your peers having you found you not guilty, I will adjudge you to be not guilty of that count. As the counts 4, 5, 6, and 7, providing false information to a law enforcement officer, I will adjudge you to be guilty of those counts in order that you be fingerprinted here in open court at this time.
All right, so before we get to the sentencing, not guilty, folks.
Yeah. I
know. She's been found not guilty of murdering her 2-year-old daughter, Kaylee. The jury declined to convict her of either first-degree murder or manslaughter. Instead, the jurors found Casey Anthony guilty on 4 counts of providing false information to law enforcement, which are misdemeanors. Clutching the hand of her defense, you saw, attorney Jose Baez, Casey Anthony, began to sob as the verdict was read. I mean, what do you guys think in the chat? Like, you tell us, of course, what you think about all this. I mean, most of you probably already know. You saw this coming. What do you think, Valley?
I think that Baez used psychological warfare. I think that he did a really good job of planting evidence in jurors' minds that George somehow, whether it was essay or emotionally manipulated his daughter to be true. I think that with Florida at the time having a very high case of leaving those ladders up, that could have been doubt.
It just had to be reasonable.
Right. I mean, look, people have been convicted for much less.
Yeah.
But I think because there was no DNA, the chlorophyll/chloroform searches on the computer were contradicting themselves. Casey could have
the forensic getting kind of like pushed back by the defense's forensic analysis. People are saying chloroform is found in everything, also in Clorox, bleach. Hello, Cindy.
Right. Yeah, again, with the Febreze, with the dryer sheet, with the phrasing on whether or not this was a metaphorical
dead body
way
smell.
of speaking.
Yeah.
In response to the decomposition, body smell. George insists, no, he literally meant it that way. Cindy was going back and forth. If there was proof that Casey Anthony did indeed unalive Kaylee, I think she easily could have gotten an insanity plea with all of the fictional characters going on.
I agree with that.
I truly think this was a tough one. I think we should, just talk about the total sentencing and then talk a little bit more about their jury's decision. I know there's one specific juror, a male juror, that explained some of what went through his mind. But again, let's go over specifically what she got in prison, and how the rest played out once we finish this clip.
Count 4 of the indictment, alleging providing false information to a law enforcement officer, basically dealt with the following conduct. It is alleged that the defendant was employed at Universal Studios during the year 2008. This
And
information was
he was
given
not.
pursuant to an investigation for a
She
missing
stopped working there in
persons
2006.
report. That information
Okay.
caused law enforcement
That's why
in
the 2
following
years
up
went
on that
by.
statement
Mhm.
to go to Universal Studios to expend law enforcement
Basically, like
resources
delaying.
to
Yeah.
determine that, in fact, Ms. Anthony did not, in fact, work at Universal Studios.
There we go.
Count 5, Ms. Anthony informed the authorities that she had left her child, Kelly Marie Anthony, at the Sawgrass Apartments with a babysitter, which caused law enforcement, again, as a result of a missing persons report, to develop and follow various leads trying to locate this babysitter, commonly known as Zanny. Count 6, again, dealt with the fact that she had informed 2 quote, employees of Universal Studios, Jeff Hopkins and Juliet Lewis, of the disappearance of Kelly Marie Anthony. Ms. Anthony, in count 7, indicated to law enforcement that she had received a call and spoke to Kelly Marie Anthony on July 15, 2008 at approximately 12 p.m., thus causing law enforcement to devote extensive resources. As a result of those 4 separate and distinct lies, law enforcement expended a great deal of time, energy, and manpower looking for young Kelly Marie Anthony. This search for her went on from July through December, over several months, trying to find Kelly Marie Anthony.
Yeah. I mean, at least we got that. I mean, you can't just say after, the 2 sides arguing about everything, like they pretty much admitted the whole time that she was lying throughout those 31 days. So
That was the one. Yeah.
Mhm.
That was the one absolute. And the judge isn't happy.
He doesn't look, I guess he's, if you're a judge, you have some sort of like, you got to look up to law and
Yeah.
the court, and how the whole process works with the jury, and you're judged by a jury of your peers and all of that. So he may have his own misgivings about it, we don't know, but at the same time, like, he's going to respect what, it seems like he's going to respect what the jury came up with. And
Right.
he probably also believes that there was too much reasonable doubt. He probably does, because I kind of do too. Like, the way it was
Yeah.
presented, it really did. I know we have some jury deliberation. You were just going to kind of like break down the jury for us.
Yeah, I'm just going to skim over, quickly, that the jury got the case on July 4th, 2011. So there were 12 people, 400 pieces of evidence, and the decision came way faster than anyone expected. Like, the lying charge was unanimous. It was 12-0 guilty.
Mhm.
The murder charge started 10-2 to acquit, then shifted to 12-0 after only 30 minutes. Like, let that sink in. And
Yeah.
that's because of the lack of the cause of the death swayed them. the
Many
varying
questions. Yeah.
right, the varying opinions of the witnesses. For manslaughter, I'm kind of shocked. I'm kind of shocked that manslaughter wasn't more of a deliberation. They started split 6-6. Okay.
Mhm.
Then 11-1 to acquit after the debate.
They must have been arguing
Um,
like crazy in that room.
yeah. Because the evidence was not strong enough.
Yeah.
So we've dissected every angle of the trial, Biddy.
Yeah.
What are your closing thoughts?
Yeah. Yeah. So not guilty on murder, manslaughter, child abuse, just those 4 counts of lying to the police. I remember this time period. I remember watching some of it live and I felt like someone like punched me in the stomach.
Yeah.
I was like still kind of young at the point. I wasn't really following it like we did today, over the past few weeks.
Oh my
But
God. Hours and hours, by the way, you guys.
yeah,
Like, and keep in mind, like, there is information about the Casey Anthony trial. There are a lot of other podcasts that cover this. We didn't look at any of them. Like,
yeah.
we only went to Court TV and a few other sources that were covering the trial at the time. And
Mhm.
we really dove deep. We did not take any shortcuts with this.
No, definitely not. Because I kind of wanted to come up to my own conclusions. Like I didn't want to be swayed one way or the other, get influenced on a specific interpretation of this or that. So like I think like we can probably just have like a whole full out conversation and probably read the whole everything of the timeline, everything just for everybody. But yeah, so like after hearing all of the testimony at the time, what was found, like how could they have possibly not found her guilty, at least for child abuse? Like how about you, like with that?
Yeah. So, I mean, I was a mess.
Yeah.
I'm just like overwhelmed, honestly. Like, I couldn't believe after everything we've heard.
Mm-hmm.
But going back after the testimony, I kind of get why the jury landed there.
Yeah.
And honestly, again, going through this deep dive with you, like it did change some conclusions that differed from episode 1 that we did. Like Arpad Voss with his air samples from Casey's trunk, like those shockingly high chloroform levels. Cindy's testimony about chloroform on the computer, like total curveball. I feel like her internal monologue was going back and forth between the truth.
Yeah.
Just like, losing both her daughter and her granddaughter. It's a lot. It's maddening.
Right. And the prosecution's like was pushing it as the duct tape was a murder weapon. Jeff Ashton, one of the prosecutors, he even shows a haunting animation of it. We didn't show that. Of over Kaylee's face, but Dr. Warner Spitz counters that it was just near the skull, not on it, maybe disturbed post death. Maybe that's why they were trying to like push hard at Roy Kronk at one point. They were probably trying to like fit it all into a bow. Then Dr. G, the medical examiner, can't even give a cause of death, just homicide by undetermined means. Like, no wonder one of the jurors said they were sick about it, but couldn't convict without more proof.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am just thinking that justice got tangled in like technicalities here because the testimony tore some holes in the case and Casey slipped through them. Kaylee deserved better. Like, if Casey wasn't found convicted, someone should have been. Hey, that's our take. I think the justice system is broken. Let us know what you guys all think about this case, like the trial, the verdict. did the juror get it right as far as reasonable doubt?
Right.
Do you think if this case occurred today, there would be a different verdict?
Yeah. Yeah, well said, you guys. And don't forget, our next episode will be closing things out and looking into where they are now, specifically Casey Anthony, because some highlights from her documentary, presenting, starting her new job as legal advocate, TikTok content creator. That's basically what got us all started in this to begin with. So we got to
Yeah.
show you guys that. We have some interviews that were done of Cindy and George Anthony. We'll also be showing some remarks from one of the jurors because they received a ton of backlash, as you can probably imagine. So we're going to hear from her. Don't forget to join us for that wrap up of this intense and heartbreaking case. Thank you guys for hanging out with us. So we hope you all enjoyed the show. I'm Biddy, your fast talking New Yorker.
And I'm Valley, your basic California girl. And don't forget, you can find us on X. Biddy is at ElizabethBiddy213A, and I am at the Cali Melody on X, as well as the Roma Nation Network on X at the real Roma_AK, and on YouTube and Rumble, both have the same name at Roma Nation, all one word. We do also have our website here where you can find things. There you go, all Roma Nation. You have our Discord where we work and chill, our merch, and everything else. And so just come hang out with us. Hang out with us in the Discord. Of course, if you purchase any of the merch on the channel, it does support us and what we are trying to achieve here. And I am just so invested in the Casey Anthony trial and this unsolved mystery. We will be doing more true crime deep dives, as well as focusing on pop culture, current events, and who knows what else. I'm just really excited for this journey, Biddy. So
same love.
Yeah. See you all next time on Facts and Sass from Valley.
Later,
And
everybody.